Today is Wednesday, October 12th, and this is the Hendrick Hudson Board of Education meeting. Can we please stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we were going to be starting this evening with some recognition of a few different student groups, and they asked us to reschedule, so that will be forthcoming in the next meeting or two this fall. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as stated?
So moved.
A second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. And can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Second? All in favor? Oh, we blew right past the audience comments for non-agenda items. Sorry about that. Do we have anyone signed up for non-agenda?
We do.
We do.
Well, I just wanted to hear about the transportation. I'll wait so you guys talk about it. Sorry, I wrote it down.
She's going to talk, it's a middle school question though. Are you going to talk about the middle school at all, Joe?
I'm not entirely sure, but we could
Well,
connect
I'll wait
after
for
and we'll
you
see
to-
what happens.
I have additional questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Love to.
Perfect.
That's how it was kind
Yeah,
of set up.
sorry, I blew
You're the
past that
presentation.
section.
I love that. She's
All
on
right.
point. I love
Okay,
that.
so
She's
we
great.
approved the consent agenda. And now we're moving on to.
With minutes?
Oh, okay, good. I was like, well, what am I missing? All right, so the superintendent's report. Go ahead.
A few updates. When we were last here 3 weeks ago, Enrique and I gave the board an update on the potential of bus monitors or substitute chauffeurs. We did go ahead at the end of that meeting to post for some substitute chauffeurs. We did get a slate of candidates. They were interviewed and sent off for New York State Education Department as well as New York State Department of Transportation fingerprint approval. It's important to underscore that while we may move forward with appointing additional chauffeurs, it's not necessarily a guarantee that they will be on buses all the time or really at all. The opportunity, given the specifics of the law or the various laws that we talked about 3 weeks ago, was that we felt that was the most direct way that if we chose to have a second adult on any of our school buses, that was the easiest way and that those individuals could serve multiple purposes for us, not just as a second set of eyes on a bus to help with any sort of management issues or to remind children to get off the bus, which sometimes has happened in the afternoon runs. But they could also drive for us in a substitute fashion, whether it's a small bus or doing some small athletic runs or after school runs. We would essentially build a bench. It's no different than when the board approves substitute teachers. We approve them for the potential to work if the need arises. So we're not approving anyone because of the timing and the sequence of timing of those individuals to get approved. As we typically do, or as we have done at certain times or certain years, we have asked individuals to ride the bus as a second set of eyes and ears. Liz has done that. She's collected some data. She'll continue to collect some data, but I think that also comes on the heels of, as Liz promised, as she presented here earlier in September, and in various communications, that some bus routes have been adjusted, some ride times have been drastically reduced, some bus stops have changed with some parent requests. And things appear to be tightening up, and the system appears to have been correcting itself over the first 5 weeks of school, but also with some changes that Liz and her team has made. So I wanted to alert the board, but certainly the community, that in a future meeting, if they see some approvals on an agenda for additional chauffeurs, those individuals can serve a multitude of purposes. The cost to the district, the out-of-pocket cost is around $56 for an afternoon ride. I know that was a question the board had. These individuals would be slotted, if we choose to go that route, for basically a 2-hour shift. That 2-hour shift can include middle school bus runs and some elementary bus runs, depending on the length and duration of the bus run. And when the middle school run is done, those particular individuals could be dropped off to ride an elementary run, or the individuals would just be responsible for an elementary run. But the language of the CSEA contract is that would be at least a 2-hour commitment, and so that would be approximately just under $56 a run per bus. But to test this and to collect data, as I said earlier, Liz, in any number of days had 1, 2, or I think as many as 4 different sets of eyes on some afternoon bus runs at the elementary and middle school. She'll continue to talk to the drivers, she'll talk to that additional adult, she's working with principals on any bus issues. She spends a lot of time with the principals and watching videotapes, and in case anyone doesn't know, all of our buses have at least 1 camera, some of them have 3, and not just for visual purposes, but for audio purposes as well. So if anyone has an incident on a bus to report or a child comes home, please make sure their principal knows, and they will make sure to watch that video and follow up.
How does transportation decide when a monitor might be needed? You said that there's a bench and they're available, so what's the, how do we make that call?
Yeah, Liz initially decided, because of some reports we heard from families and children, and even feedback from some drivers, that some of our littlest elementary runs were lingering because children weren't sure when to get off and needed a reminder, so she consulted with the bus drivers to say, would this help you? And that was one determinant. Another, I believe, was from a couple middle school runs where kids were not behaving appropriately, so she consulted with the drivers and any information or feedback from the principal to get an extra set of eyes on there.
Okay, thank you. And so the feedback we've gotten so far is that those, that so far has been successful, and it's not ongoing right now. It's really just hit or miss.
That's the feedback. Now that, that's hit and miss. It all determines or depends on how many kids are on the bus that day or who remembers to get off. But, mostly at the middle school level, it's around correcting some behavior and expectations. And at the elementary level, it was around reminding kids to get off the bus. But she'll continue to check in. And if we do move forward with hiring some additional folks, she'll probably use that feedback to determine who she would deploy.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, have any of the administrators been on the buses to go over behavior and expectations?
They've been on the buses. They've brought a group of kids off the bus that couldn't behave and had parents pick them up.
Okay.
They've met with students in small groups from feedback of morning runs. So that typically happens. It's not uncommon at the beginning of the year, but they have done all of those things.
Yeah, I have a question about, have we dealt with there was a lot, parent complaints about crowding, overcrowding on buses, kids sitting on floors, standing up. Have we addressed those concerns?
To the best of my knowledge, we have. We're not receiving those reports anymore. I know she moved around some elementary buses and moved kids and changed some routes, and in fact, some of our elementary families here may have received an email. Jeremy, you may have gotten one about a change in bus time or a drop off.
We stayed, but nothing changed for us, but everyone got an email to check the portal.
Yep. So yeah, those are being addressed. I believe the capacity of our buses legally is 72, and we don't have more than 60 kids on a middle school bus run. And that's it.
Can I just jump in here? There's 62 kids on my kid's bus. I know that for a fact. I'm sorry to speak out of turn, but that's what I'm listening for. So I just seems very focused on the other kids, but
Okay.
thank you for that.
So I have a couple questions. So there was some people whose ride times on paper were reduced fairly substantially, from what I understand, which is a good thing. Did we add, so I don't know, do we call the short buses vans? Is that the terminology here? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and we've used vans to get into tricky spots
Yeah.
where buses will need to turn around in a cul-de-sac or very narrow runs or very narrow roads. So it's not uncommon to see vans at any of the schools, well, for children to
Yeah.
ride a van morning or afternoon.
How many, if any, buses did we add through the reshuffling, and how many vans did we add through the reshuffling that we've released
I
recently?
don't believe any vans were added. I'll check on buses.
From day one, no vans? We've had the same number?
2 buses?
2 buses, and no vans additional?
I don't know about the bands, but I know about 2.
Because I only ask because I have a friend who lives on a street that was a bus to start. They went to a van. So I don't know if that van was vacant and had vacancy and they just added to it, or
Yeah,
did we run more?
We can check. I know she moves, she'll move children around. Sometimes it's where the van can maneuver in parts of our district, but also even timing that. Some of the longer runs, for example, I believe there's a van that goes from BB to our furthest northeast corner of our district and is just quicker. And the
Yeah.
route's quicker to go through Peekskill and down Maple Ave.
And then how does a bus, like, what is the cost of adding up 2 buses? Is that, we own the buses, so I'm guessing they're sitting there, so it's just the labor? So if it's our employees, is it overtime
Yeah, no, the
incurred? Are we
labor is-
taking them out of a building and not?
Yeah, the labor is already there. These are afternoon custodians that would start their shift on an afternoon bus and then go to the school, as opposed to some of it, and Enrique will know better, but some of our morning drivers begin as a driver and then report to the school. Some of our custodians don't drive and they report to the school right in the morning, so we sort of have these staggered shifts to make sure that schools are always covered.
Does that mean they are in the school fewer hours because they're now driving a bus?
Of course, so there's a cost. There's a cost because those drivers were not sitting doing nothing. So instead of being in the buildings, cleaning the buildings, they are driving. So sooner or later, we will have to pay overtime to clean those buildings. So there's a cost. So far, there hasn't been a cost, but I foresee a cost, obviously, because if not, that means that for 2 hours, 2 people were doing nothing in the buildings.
Yeah, which is unlikely.
That's
Okay,
what I'm saying.
okay.
But so far, we haven't.
So then whose budget will that hit? Does that hit a transportation budget, or does that hit Anthony's budget? Well, I don't know, maybe they're connected, I don't know how it works, but is that gonna hit?
Usually, we try to hit the transportation budget because that's state aid. That gives us state aid.
Okay.
So, anything like that, as of today, for example, and it's always been, all the custodian drivers have their salary and benefits go to the custodian side and half to the transportation side. For example, Anthony's salary, a portion also goes to transportation, so we can get state aid because he helps Liz. Obviously, Liz is 100%
Sure,
transportation.
yeah, okay, thank you.
And then I have one more question. Do we have ridership numbers that look so far that we're gonna meet our state aid that we were hoping for? Are we seeing the ridership where we need it to be on the buses?
We got an email from our consultant, and according to him, so far it's a yes.
Okay.
But that's until we don't do it at the end of the year, Liz does the unallowables, but the unallowables was, and I'll bring you the email, or I'll look at it here. It was 14%, and we're down to like 8-9%. Unallowable. So
Okay.
the lower the percentage, the more state aid we get.
Okay.
And then how does that measure? So the consultant says we're trending in a direction that will allow for more state aid, but what does the consultant do to obtain that information? They have people with a clicker watching how many kids get on and off
No,
the bus?
it's basically, everything is in the software program. So the software program will say, the Basso family, they have 2 kids. Last year, they were less than a mile from BV. No transportation aid for those two kids. Now they are more than a mile. Now I give you transportation aid.
All right, so that raises a separate question for me, and I'm sorry, everyone, but I'm confused. So I thought a couple of weeks ago when we were talking, we said that the ridership aid was going to be based on actual usage. So if more parents are driving, then that would detract.
No. But,
So how are we measuring that? And I think that's what you were asking, is the number of kids physically sitting on the bus at the threshold that we were expecting. What?
Right, that's what I thought too.
Yeah. So how are we measuring the number of kids sitting in the seat to make sure that we're going to trigger that additional threshold that we were hoping to obtain so that we could offset the additional cost of zigzagging across the
the
field?
second part I need to ask.
Okay, fair.
I need to ask Liz because I don't know how she knows how many kids are riding.
Right.
Okay.
Fair,
So
thank
in
you.
that sense, I'll have to ask you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Can I ask a question? I know this is out of order.
We can't, unfortunately, we
Okay,
have.
then I'll wait.
Yeah, perfect.
Great.
And put your name on the list.
Oh, it's there.
Okay.
I just wasn't sure.
Awesome.
Of the agenda.
And you can ask all the questions you want. If we can't answer it, we won't answer it, but
You got it.
we'll take note for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah? All right, so any other questions on transportation update from Mr. Hawkridge? Good. All right, so moving on to our next Indian Point decommissioning update.
Yes, what you have in front of you and what was posted online are 3.5 pages of slides. These slides come from the Decommissioning Oversight Board, which last met on September 22nd. There's nothing worse than reading slides to folks, and so I'm not going to read any of the slides, but at the top right corner of each slide are the slide numbers that came from the full slide deck from the 22nd. But if you draw your attention to slides 34, 35, and 36, and 37, that's really the meat and potatoes of the discussion, what the next recommended next steps are. So it's important to understand that there are current monitors that have always existed at and around Indian Point. And it measures dust, it measures a whole lot of certainly hazardous material and radiological activity. Those monitors have always been in place. They've been in place in the radius around the plant forever, and that Holtec will continue to monitor even through decommissioning. On slide 35, a team of technical experts, both through Columbia University graduate students, but technical experts that serve on the state committee and have served in a number of various capacities statewide and nationally, have called for additional monitoring, especially since the school's proximity to the power plant has been of concern. The second part, or the bottom half of slide 35, is really the focal point, is that the recommendation is to put monitoring on the fence line. Basically what that does, it's like tracking weather, that you want to know that the weather is coming before it gets to you, sort of the radar effect. And so what the technical experts are suggesting is you need monitoring almost like a bullseye, very, very close, and intense monitoring very close to where the demolition is happening, and move it out like a bullseye. They're suggesting that monitoring beyond the fence line may not be as useful for a number of reasons. One is interference. And one of the technical experts suggested that only having monitoring on the school property, you actually get some false positives with emissions from buses and just other stuff that happens around school. You might get a reading that has an unintended consequence. So they really want to focus the monitoring around the plant and use that data and create a series of warning systems that would trigger a set of actions, not just for the school, but for the community. There are a lot of residents that live around Indian Point. There are municipal buildings around Indian Point in addition to the school. The heavy demolition, this is important. We've heard from a number of residents, this is slide 36, about heavy demolition. There is decommissioning, which is the slow, methodical takedown of the plant, if you think of like Legos. And then there's the demolition, which is of the nuclear, the domes, which is where the nuclear power was generated. The timing of that is not to begin until late '23. Holtec, under the supervision of state and federal agencies, have tested demolition. They have gone in and done sample testing of the concrete. They've gone in with a very fine drill and tested the air inside the domes, and so far they have not shared any concerns about what to anticipate when they take down the domes in their entirety. But they will continue to test. As I said, they test the air quality on campus, and they're going to test any of the dust that could be released through various samplings of the domes. So slide 37 is really the recommended next steps. And the next steps include having a third party that will report to the Decommissioning Oversight Board, but will have the opportunity to influence where the monitors go. This will be an independent group that will track the monitoring and will report back to all of the entities, to us, to the school community, to the larger Buchanan, and community around Indian Point. It's important to understand that there are a lot of residents that live closer to Indian Point across the river, perhaps, than even on our side. So this is an initiative that is going to include, that will be an effort that will include, there will be a multi-county effort and include multiple municipalities. So the timeline is that the state would put out an RFP later in November. We would go through the process of identifying this independent third-party agency to monitor the air and how they would report back. And you would see that the timeline to identify these folks, get them on board, have their recommendations not only made, but also purchase of equipment made and set up by December of '23, so in 14 short months. That would be in advance of any of the major demolition that would take place on campus. So this was the discussion back on September 22nd. There is another Decommissioning Oversight Board meeting. I don't have it here when it is, and I don't have it in my phone, but that's the spirit of set of recommendations of the group. And, you know, the technical experts have really led this effort because they do it for a living, and they have done it for a living. They've worked on nuclear power plants that have had schools and large municipal structures as close to the power plant as our school is, and in other more densely populated areas. So that is the recommendation as it stands now. We'll receive an update on this timeline at our next meeting, and I could certainly report back, or you could come to the meetings. The meetings are now in person at the town hall in Cortland, but they're also live streamed on Zoom as well, and they're recorded. So all of these meetings, you can go to the New York State website, but they are more prominent. You can find them quicker on the town of Cortland website. They're long meetings, so you have to fast forward through a lot of different content. I think it's all important, but in terms of this discussion happened, I think, in the last maybe 45 minutes of the meeting on the 22nd.
One question. So has there been any progress on finding a national repository for nuclear waste? You know, it was talked about a couple of years ago, and
yeah, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of hope that the feds would approve, I believe it's in New Mexico, Yucca Mountain. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of advocacy for that. In fact, I believe it's Holtec, don't quote me on it, has been one of the leaders in trying to get that approved, and that they have signaled to the industry and to the government that they would they'd work on behalf of the government to run that operation. The issue is not whether or not the federal government will allow a repository, it's how do you get the spent fuel there? And how do you get it there securely and safely, because it would have to travel through multi-states, and you'd have to have significant numbers of agreements. And I believe at the last conversation, this is probably over a year ago, we felt the safest and most efficient, but certainly not timely transport would be by water. But that would not allow the spent fuel to get all the way there to the mountain in New Mexico. There would still have to be land transport. So it's still an open discussion. I know over the last number of legislative sessions, there have been proposals to permit the federal government to explore those federal lands for this purpose. But I think some of the technical matters, that's great. It's great we could use it. We have no way to get there.
So the camp group, would they be responsible for creating the plan if the monitors are triggered, or would we be working with Alteris? Like if, God forbid, something happens, the monitors are triggered, who comes up with a safety plan for our buildings?
They would be the ones writing the safety plan because of their technical expertise in terms of air quality with respect to potential release of radiological dust. They would be the ones with the authority to say, this is what you have to do if, based on science and research and their expertise. We would then, certainly at BV, but really all of our schools, would create any number of processes of how we deal with that, different protocols. Is it evacuation? Is it, shut down the HVAC? I mean, there are a lot of those questions we would have to explore after the recommendations would be made.
Thank you.
So I know we have this $500,000 grant that's going to help us install all of this. What's the cost to us after that?
Right now, the proposal that we heard from Columbia late spring last year, I believe there were 3 models and all of them were well under $500,000. And the technical experts said even the Cadillac plan is something we could do. That's just equipment. What the camp person would do, I guess for lack of a better term, is they would be the boots on the ground to measure it. So what we would need to do is after we receive the proposals, so we're into early '23, see what those cost proposals would be. I'd be inclined to say we have a budget of $500,000 for supplies, equipment, and personnel, and if our budget couldn't cover that cost, our recommendation would not be to cut corners. It would be to seek more resources from the state. Right? This was not a decision any of us around the table or anyone since 2017 when the plan announced their closure. So our position is the financial burden should not be borne by taxpayers.
So I thought the Cadillac plan, if you will, included monitoring because that third option was a company that has monitors already and they have that real-time trigger system. So I thought that for being under the 500, that covered the monitoring outside of the equipment, so we wouldn't break that delta.
Yeah, those proposals were supplies and equipment, not personnel. This would be an outside third-party agency that would be responsible for monitoring the monitors. I guess I'm using monitors too much, and be the fail-safe to report what the data are telling, whether it's to Holtec, to us, to the county emergency system, to the Village of Buchanan, Town of Cortland. So this recommendation and timeline includes a team of individuals to physically do the work and be the boots on the ground.
Got it.
What Columbia came up with was really they priced out equipment.
Got it. Okay, and then and this is not an ask for now, I think, but it'd be a good piece of information to maybe ask of this decommissioning team. In the other plants that they've decommissioned that are in areas similar to ours or in areas that are more densely populated than ours, what types of materials were triggered during their monitoring processes? How frequently did it happen? What was the range? So this way people have a level of comfort that, hey, this isn't the first time they did it and here's what we experienced. So this way we can kind of assume that this is likely what we will also experience.
Yeah, and I'll ask for more concrete information.
Yeah.
That's how the conversation started, to say you got to be really careful about monitors in in a school or really, really close to a school, because what they have found is that chalk dust, and I know we don't use a whole lot of chalkboards, but even dry erase dust can trigger it. Certainly exhaust from buses and some other things could as well. So they have a much more thorough picture of that, but immediately they were able to say that even those sort of releases can create some false positives, but I can get more info.
Thank you.
All right. That's it for questions. Everyone's good? Now
Sorry to interrupt. I found the email about the question that Jeremy asked about the
transportation.
Transportation, if you don't mind. It's 8.47%, the unallowable. And I found a way of how they calculate. So for example, here, let's talk about Blue Mountain Trip 71 AM. So it says the distance. The distance is 7.89 miles. Students transported.
7.what?
7.9. Students transported 32. Student allowable pupils 32. Non-allowable pupil 0. Multiplier, that's a 1.5. And then pupil miles allowable 252.587. So that's how they make the calculation for every bus route.
So they're logging every day, sorry.
That's a
So
question
every
I don't
day,
understand.
They're logging how many
That's-
students they have, which makes sense, because you want to know how many students you picked up, how many got off the bus,
That's
right? How
that's
many
the
you expect
answer.
to get at the end of
That's
the
a
day.
question that I need to ask Liz, to see if this is on a daily basis, they just pick days.
Yeah, is it a sample, or is it based on the number of kids on that ride? And
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if they're actually tracking. I've never seen
I
a
would think they would
person with a
have to,
clicker.
because you want to know how many kids you took in the morning to figure out how many you need to take home and whether you're over, right? Because it used to be.
No, you have to make sure you have them all covered.
You have to have a seat for every child, whether they ride
One way or
once or
Yeah.
180 days a year.
Because
But
some
you
kids
don't
drive
need to
one way and
know
not
how
the
many you
other.
had in the morning, because what if you end up with more than you had?
What I'm saying is you
Drop
can't,
off.
you can't remove a child from the bus rolls because of lack of riding.
So we have to have a space regardless, so it really doesn't matter whether or not you have a student on the bus
Correct.
for state aid.
No.
No, it
No,
doesn't. We're
no,
not, we're
no.
not getting state aid if they're not riding the buses.
So the question is.
So if your bus rides,
No, I
That's the
was here for that,
We'll have to
how would anybody, I
that's
mean,
the
unless you're
question.
logging it
That's-
every
that's the
That
ride?
is
question.
exactly
And
the
again,
question.
That's the question.
The
Okay.
question, for example, here is that they talk about 32 students.
Right.
Is that on a one particular day? It's
Right.
an average? That's a question that I don't have the answer, and I
Okay.
need to ask Liz how they counted those 32.
And how many
students.
kids were supposed to be on that bus out of the 32?
Right, and is that a
At
one day,
least-
you don't know if
at
it's a
least
daily report or?
60, because if not, we won't have a 72 passenger bus.
So think about that. So 50% of the kids we expected to be on that bus basically weren't? It's a
Could be.
60-person
Yeah, but
route
that's
that had
gonna
32
happen-
people.
But that'll happen all the time. I mean, you pick up kids early for a doctor's appointment, or you drop them off.
Well, that was an AM bus, but
Or,
yeah.
yeah, or
Let me-
maybe they have some after
But
school
that's the question about state
activity.
aid, right? Where it comes from.
Yeah, we can debate this all we want.
No,
We
yeah.
Yeah, no, we just need to know.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back with that calculation.
Sorry.
Thank you.
In the PM, that was the AM. The PM, were only 26 students.
So they have to be logging it
Sounds
at
right.
every trip.
Again,
I think they
at
are.
that
They have to.
particular day, at that particular whatever, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. You're up.
All right, we have a couple presentations. We put them into two documents, but it's really one larger conversation. I'd like to welcome Armand Quadrini up to the podium. Armand is working on our building condition survey. He is the lead architect. He's worked on a number of projects with our school district for a number of years with KSQ Design. And late spring, when the board wanted to move forward with proceeding with the building condition survey a little sooner than the state mandate, we did an RFP, we interviewed various architects, and we brought Armand back to the family, back to the table here.
We're very grateful. Thank you.
So we will turn it over to Armand to talk a little bit. I know we have talked a lot about building condition survey and capital project and all of those things. He's going to walk us through what a building condition survey is. His team has been in a number of the schools. They're going to be wrapping that up over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And then talk about what do you do with a building condition survey. You build a 5-year plan and they lead to a capital project, and we'll talk about potential timing and some opportunities we may have to consider that down the road.
We appreciate this opportunity to address the school board and the community, primarily for a process-oriented presentation that talks about the purpose and need for the 5-year capital plan, how initiatives are underscored and make their way up for potential inclusion into a capital project, the best time for a referendum, and then also we did an example pre-bond schedule, and again, very preliminary, but to talk about the steps in the process to be required to move forward. So the 5-year capital plan is required by every single school district in New York State. They roughly run on a 5-year schedule, and the idea is to collect data and project out for 5 years the needs of the school district. I'm representing a big team of architects and engineers. We have, in addition to the architects, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, civil engineer, and structural engineer. We climb through the schools from the roofs to the basements, windows, roofs, mechanical, ventilation, the condition of the finishes, furniture, everything in the school sort of comprises the building conditions survey. And then that's information that in a systemic format we report to the state education department. A living document, this just means that it's a document that you don't put on the shelf and forget about. We're updating it every year, every school year. We work directly with Anthony Merlini as projects are picked off. We update cost, schedule, and so on. So this is really the roadmap for investment or reinvestment in your schools. We have facilities impact on the delivery of education programs, so we also look at the configuration of the schools and how they're supporting education programs and needs in the buildings. At the end, we prioritize those needs. So the list of potential items and costs will exceed typically what a school district is able to invest, but we make sure that investments can happen incrementally over time, and then you have a coherent piece at the end of the day. So need is really created in 3 different categories. Aging infrastructure is far and away the biggest driver of projects and costs for public schools. So again, what I talked about in terms of code issues, ADA, Americans with Disability Access, all the engineering infrastructure and so on, super important. Changing enrollment can cause a need to put additions on schools, and then evolving education program needs. So when I think about when I went to school for a super long time ago, there were no computers in the classrooms, and that's sort of a really severe example, but how we integrate technology and how technology evolves over time is another driver of need. We invite everybody that's part of our Henderson community to be part of the process in terms of data collection for the 5-year capital plan. We will have a series of meetings like the one we're having tonight with the Board of Education. We meet on a regular basis with school district administration. I'll talk in a minute about a walk that I do with each school's principal through their school. We meet with staff, teachers. We try to also talk to parents and then students along the way. One of the hallmarks of our process is for me to walk the school with the school's principal. We've completed 4 of the 5 schools. This is really the opportunity for the principal to share with us how the building is performing in terms of supporting the education program. So you might hear anything from our art studio is small and we're having trouble supporting the program. We're having trouble with how we get our band and orchestra to fit on the stage. And that sort of on-the-ground information really helps us, or arms us rather, to offer design solutions to move forward. Student social and emotional needs have emerged. They've always been part of the program and the need, but they've really emerged as a discussion point these last 10 years, and we're cognizant of that as well. So, school districts have a number of methods to fund projects, and we've outlined 5 of those buckets. We referred to them this evening on the sort of the upper right. Annual capital budget, so school districts will put aside money towards a capital fund, and then that's voted on to allow for the dollars to be invested in specific projects. Those are typically small to medium-sized projects. Grants and programs, so grants can come federal, state, and local. Like we've just heard the school board talking about a grant in connection with Indian Point decommissioning, and so there's another opportunity for investment. Energy performance contracts are actually, Hendrick Hudson Schools is engaged with an energy performance specialist right now. I believe that project's in the planning stage and it'll be released shortly, but that's another opportunity. And then Anthony has an operations and maintenance budget every year, and he's able to pick off smaller projects. So all the way at the top, at 12 o'clock, in every generation or every period of a school district, there's a need to really tackle large capital projects. And again, typically, a need is created by older and aging infrastructure. The bond is a community referendum that invites the community to vote up or down, yes or no, about reinvestment in the schools. It may or may not affect taxes, and that's super important, and one of the lenses that we'll use to think about reinvestment in our schools. So we've studied a lot of the bonds that we've worked on over the last 10 years, and what we've learned is that items that are really critical to the mission of the school district are the projects that tend to bubble up and make it into the bond. And you'll see when we're at the end of this process that we'll identify many more needs than we can afford to reinvest in. But items having to do with safety and security, we tackled a lot of those in the 2018 bond, I'm proud to say. Infrastructure I talked about, how students learn, and then community facilities. So the recent synthetic turf field was a really great reinvestment that we did here at HUD. So we find, and again, this is anecdotal, but I think it's very prevalent in the public school community. School districts tend to find the most successful bond passage in May and November of the calendar year. So November, I don't mean next month, I mean, as an example, 13 months from now in November of 23. November is a time that we've had 3 months to get back to school from the summer. We would typically build consensus in the spring and then work really hard on the details over the summer, and then come back and have the campaign in the fall. November is off cycle with your budget vote. The other philosophy is to have your community vote up or down everything on the same day. Come in May and vote on the annual budget and the bond on the same day, and that's also and there's no one size fits all. We have to decide together what's best for the Hendrick Hudson schools. So those were our prepared remarks in terms of process. If it's okay, I'd like to walk us through the steps, and there are a number of steps to build consensus towards a successful bond, and also to make sure that the bond checks all the boxes so that we're legally ready to have a community referendum. Visioning sessions with Hendrick Hudson School leadership. So that's something that we'd like to work with the district administration to plan for in November. We want to really engage directly with all of you at the table to understand your thoughts and where you'd like to see reinvestment in the schools. The facility reporting or the building conditions survey, we're working on that now, and we hope to have that rolled out by the middle of November, including costs. Balancing vision and cost, so we want to make sure that we really invest the money in a surgical way, and we bring forward the most important needs for the school district. Seeker stands for State Environmental Quality Review Act, so a special seeker planner will come to the school district, evaluate the scope of the projects, and then identify any potential environmental impacts. And again, there's no issues with that, just that we need to check that box. In this example, in January, after the new year, I would think that the very public part of the campaign would be underway. We'd have the seeker work mostly complete, and then we would be working with the school board to refine the final scope and cost. We would then, in end of March or early April, adopt the seeker and the bond resolution. There's a 45-day waiting period, which enables a legal community referendum on May 16th in '23, which is the same day that your budget vote comes off. I just summarized 100 different steps and needs that go into a pre-bond process. We've done this before together with the administration, and this is sort of where we live, and we understand how to do this and to help sort of facilitate that process. Happy to answer any questions or invite comment from the superintendent or Anthony or Enrique.
These, just cycling back, the building condition survey is an important document if we choose to do a capital project, because the state education department looks at that to make sure that it was identified as a need or interest in order to receive aid. And the opportunity we have, and Enrique will talk about the financing coming up, is for a lot of different reasons, namely Indian Point, our state aid is going to increase over the next number of years. It's going to almost quadruple. So many districts around us receive state aid for capital projects in 60, 70, 80%. So you see them always improving their facilities because they receive a lot of state aid. We have not been that fortunate over the last number of years, so our opportunity to go out for large-scale capital improvements has really been diminished because of it has been cost ineffective and was more burdensome on taxpayers. So it's important to understand that what is in the building condition survey that is on file in the state needs to be there in order for us to receive aid on whatever priorities we may have.
I have a question. I have a few, but I'm going to start with one because based on you're talking to the staff and you're talking to the principals, has it been considered? Has our strategic plan been considered in this?
Oh, no.
I know it's separate,
Yeah.
but if you're talking about educational needs and things like that, and that's being discussed, shouldn't that be part of this if we're planning long-term?
That would happen after the building condition survey is complete, and if we want to consider a capital project. Because remember, the building condition survey is just, here's the status of your schools. If we choose to do something about it, yes, we're going to need a lot of stakeholder input to connect what needs to be done and what we would like to be done with existing, teams, committees, one of them the strategic plan, to say, okay, what do we believe or what do we want to recommend? So we're not there yet, and we're even 2 steps ahead. We would need to determine if we even want to do a capital project after we hear about the finances and after we receive the building condition survey. Those groups of stakeholders would be part of it, but we're talking, maybe January?
I just want to also mention that when I spoke to the superintendent earlier in the week, he said, when are you ready to meet with me and my cabinet? I said, well, let me finish all the data collection with the stakeholders in the schools, and I can report that up. And I think that's when that convergence, Joe's going to start to guide us. That's put a big preference or an emphasis on this, and maybe that's something that we'll talk about another time. That sort of stuff will definitely happen. I'm just not there yet.
Yep.
So I think this is wonderful. Thank you so much. I think you did a really great job explaining the process, and I'm excited to see how the survey comes out. Is this one of those situations where if the board and the district decide to go through with the capital project, that the state doesn't really tell you how much funding you get towards it. How does that work from a financial perspective? Because I know that a lot of the things we do, we're kind of like lingering in time, waiting to find out what the state funding will be.
Yeah, there are two pieces. One, there's the state approval, which Armand has, can be very laborious. So we're waiting, we do an architectural schematic design, send it to the state to say, will you approve it? They look at the architectural design, they look at the building condition survey, they said, yes, we'll approve it. Then it depends on what our aid ratio is at that time and the aid ratio when we borrow. And I know Enrique will get into that part.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Yep.
And I think it's an easy one. You say grants and programs. Who writes those grants and programs for us? Like who writes for grants? Who puts in for grants for the Hendrick Hudson School District? Is that district office? Is there groups? Do we have people on our committee?
I'm sorry, that's really a catch-all that I put in
Okay.
the document, and it could be anything from the American Recovery Act that all our school districts received, during COVID, to the grant that you're talking about earlier, or it could be grant writing. Some districts have access to grant writers and that sort of thing. But it was just a demonstration of how projects are funded.
That's a great explanation. I was just wondering if we had anyone that we use internally for that.
Not what Armand's talking about.
Okay.
Armand's talking about grants, hundreds of thousands or millions to repair fixed lighting, sidewalks, like a grant. Our energy performance contract is part grant funded from New York State, so those are big ticket capital expenses.
But do we have anyone in-house that writes small grants?
Yeah, we work with our principals and administrative team with Entergy, with I think Pepsi, with many different groups. But Armand's talking about big,
Yeah, I get what he's
not
talking about.
that kind of grant writing, more of federal and state money, like the New York State Dorm Authority, the Recovery Act, all of those.
I just had a quick question. When we did the last capital project, we were able to pay a little bit to get a more expedited approval. Does this fall under that also?
We could, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, the third-party review. We would have to cross that bridge when we get there if we choose to go forward. That would be an expense that would come out of the project.
Thank you for calling it third party, because it's really not expedited.
Yeah. So the state has a less now, but a couple state employees that review plans. School districts, and this goes back to why we're doing our BCS now. We have to have a 5-year plan. What the state had said is, okay, every 5 years, 700 plus school districts do your plan. So the state was getting plans for capital projects basically within 12 months of each other. The state couldn't keep up. And so a community would vote for a bond and say, we're going to do all these great things, and we didn't get approval for 8, 10, 12 months later, right? And so anxiety happened, we want things done yesterday. The state education department said, okay, school districts can pay for a third-party review, which basically is like a BCS. The state will approve architectural firms to stamp approval on plans on behalf of the state. That's proven not to, a little quicker, but not really quicker. But we would have to cross that bridge when we get there to see if it's worth the investment.
Okay.
Okay, so our next update on this will be sometime in November.
Armand will come back with final BCS and set of recommendations, and he mentioned earlier, and I want to give caution to everyone, it will be a very big number. And it will be things that many of us will not be able to see with our eyes. It's not going to be new stadiums and tracks and fields. It's going to be, it may include some of that, but a lot of it, and oftentimes the most costly stuff is, repairing driveways and parking lots and HVAC and plumbing and, so on and so forth. So guts and infrastructure are the most important and critical, and they're also the most expensive. For example, the high school a little over a year ago couldn't open on time. We had to start remotely for 2 days because of a significant storm that zapped out our computer system, that ran our HVAC, that was very antiquated, that is in need of repair and updating, and I know that would be in the BCS, and it will be a big number. And so a large component of this, if we decide to move forward, is going to be a lot of time and commitment educating our community and what's on the VCS, why it's mission critical, and why we need that support.
Are we allowed to point, oh, sorry, go ahead, Corey.
If I remember during the last report, every line item was rated based on criticality, right? So that we could prioritize exactly what had to be done versus what we wanted to be done, right? Versus what would be nice to have.
Yes. I just would mention that part of our job is to make sure that stakeholders that we meet with understand that just because we're writing something down doesn't mean they're going to get it. That we're really clear about the process of bringing data to the school board, that the school board is the final decision maker, that there is a prioritization process, but it's all part of data collection. So we just I wanted to be certain that you knew that we're not in the business of suggesting, we're listening and we're making sure that expectations are in check with the process.
Are we allowed to share things we would like them to include, or is it supposed to be hands-off and it's only based on what you see? Like, how do you know what the community cares about?
But that's no law.
That's not the community,
That's just the administration.
that's the administration.
Well, that's oftentimes the conflict, maybe that's not a great word, between Armand's job based on the state requirements and what we would all like to see. And that gap between what must happen or what can be funded versus what we would like to see would need to be negotiated amongst us to determine, could we petition the state to see if these things could be included in the BCS and would rise, to a certain level where the state would say, okay, we'll fund it or we'll reimburse you. For example, track fields. For a long time in New York State, artificial turf was not reimbursable. It took a lot of boards advocating for it to be reimbursable because they were able to prove it was safer over time, it was cheaper over time, got more playability over time.
Sure.
But that would be a conversation at the end of the BCS to say, what do we think is missing? Mm-hmm. And maybe Armand and his team go out and, scope it out again, or, it might be a set of conversations in the community to say, well, what's your wish list? But we may have to pay 100% rather than only pay 60%.
So we can, the opportunity to add from their original finding without knowing anything about who we are is available. That's really my question. Because there may be a big need for some, or an interest in something that they have no idea that we care about to make an improvement for music, right? Or something along those lines.
I think it's also very possible that the parents who are there all the time, who talk to their kids, will notice things that maybe you don't, or that the principal doesn't, right? So to get more input from community members who are in that building every day, in those facilities every day, might be helpful in finding, what did we potentially miss, or it just validates the fact that you found everything that you intended to find, and, you did a great job.
Our last BCS, I think, came in around a little over $50 million. Mm-hmm. And we were floored. Because, oh my God, there's $50 million of things we have to do. Well, some of them we really should. Most of them, probably delay, or as Armand said, some of his buckets pay out of a different bucket, not a capital project. At that time in 2016, when our building condition survey was done, we were still around 9 or 10% state aid. And so the board at that time had a really tough conversation of how much do we want the project to be, what should be in it, and what do we believe we could get support for.
And what do we think our state aid is going to be now?
30 to 40.
30 to 40, and is that going to be continual sliding scale? So do we get the report and do the 30 to 40 now, or is that the goal, 30 to 40, or do we think we're going to exceed that?
Let me explain how it works. They go back 3 years, so this is going to happen within 2 years because the first year that the first Indian Point reactor closed, that's coming next year. So supposedly next year we're going to start getting higher state aid. Then the following year, the second closed, and that's when the big gap happened. So, and then it stops there. It stops there because, let's say, for the sake of it, that we get into a pilot agreement with Holtec at $4 million. So since then, I went from 24 to 4. I lost 20 million. that's what the state will look at it, and they will lose the 20 million going forward.
But isn't the loss of income on a, the loss of income's on a sliding scale now? So we're continuing to lose more every year, right? We didn't lose it, isn't it a 30%?
No, that's gone.
So
There was a new
okay.
pilot that gave us the $4 million. Those 3 years are gone.
Okay, got it.
So now that's what I'm saying. Let's say that we have a long-term pilot at $4 million. So now they can see 24, 4, there's a $20 million gap, therefore your assessed values went down X%, that's how much increase in state aid. That's why it takes 3 years for them to see the movement in assessed value and in revenues for them to say, okay, now this is your state aid going forward. Because if it were year by year, just imagine
Yeah.
a factory closes for 1 year, they don't pay taxes, but then the next year someone else buys it. So they want a 3-year period to reassess the value of the school district and to give state aid. So we spoke with people at the state aid, and they told us that based on everything we told them, the $20 million difference, they believe that it's going to be 40%.
That's huge. That's a big
That's
number.
huge.
So that 50 million bucks is a lot less.
No. I'll explain that
Yeah,
in my
that's next.
presentation.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question, only because we're just talking about how the principals are the ones that are most familiar with their buildings, but the current principals are not really familiar with their buildings, right? I mean, did we took a principal out of a building that was there for 10 years and put them in a different building. So did we talk to the principals that were in those buildings prior to this for those many years? And I mean, honestly, other than Mr. Giovanazzi, the acting principal at the high school, they're all new, so.
Because we've been the district's architect for a long time, we've worked with all the principals in their previous schools, and we're getting to know them in their new schools. Anthony has his, really specific list of items that a lot of them are education related, and so we use that as a sounding board. So I feel like we've covered all the bases. Also, just as an example, right, at BV, we're hoping to get out to bid on the cafeteria renovation project. So we've been working in that school for a long time. We met with both the previous principal and then with Donna, we met with Claire. Like, we really, I think we have a good handle on the schools, and also we have a lot of clients that subscribe to the Princeton plan, and so we're going to be sharing with you some specific criteria for the elementary schools that are derived from your change to the Princeton plan. So I think really good question, and I'll be mindful about it, but I think there's a continuity to the listening and to the process.
And also the middle school, right? Because we have a new principal there as well, who's not familiar, and it's a very big building. And I know obviously Anthony is very familiar with it, but,
I spent a good part of the morning with Lauren Scollins last week, and she's great. I mean, we had a great, we met in her office, and we physically walked the whole school. And again, in my previous partnership, we designed the addition on the Blue Mountain Middle School. So we've been working in a lot of your schools for over 20 years, and so I'm proud to bring that institutional memory to ask questions about it.
So the middle school field's going to be on the list?
Yes, sir. That was on Anthony's list.
Just saying.
careful.
The geese like artificial turf,
They don't.
right? They don't.
like
don't.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you usually don't hear about that problem on the.
Awesome. Although my dog will be sad, it has nothing to change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so we have a few slides with a whole lot of numbers, and we gave a little highlight of, stole a little bit of Enrique's thunder, but he's going to walk us through our school debt profile, various loans or borrowing and bond payments that are coming off the scale, and some different scenarios for us to consider. So while Armand and his team wrap up their project, it's important to talk about what potentiality we have.
Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, it's a lot of numbers, so please interrupt me if you don't understand, because it's just a lot of numbers, because that's what financing is, only numbers. So our debt profile today, you can see it. The maturity years are between 2022-23 to 35-36. This year, 3 bonds are maturing. The $11.20 million bond that originally was issued in 2000, and then we refunded in 2012, and the $17 million that was originally issued in 2001, and we refunded in 2014. And then we have the $18.5 million bond that we need to rebond it this November for another year. So that's why I said estimated $1 million payment for this year. And then we have our energy performance contract that it's finished in 2024-25. We have a couple of small bonds that we had to issue for tax auxiliaries. Then we had a 2011 4.6 infrastructure. And then we had a $6.2 million in 2 tranches. And this was, I think, in 2014, 2015. And the reason we did 2 tranches was because a portion of it was technology and the other portion was infrastructure. And we wanted to match our assets with our liabilities, and technology doesn't last 20 years. So we said technology should last 7 years, so a portion of the bond was issued for 7 years and the other portion was issued for 20 years. Next, please. So the net total debt that is coming due the next 3 years are the $11.2 million that has a yearly savings, that we have a yearly savings of $1.2 million. Then you go down. Then again, you have total yearly savings from debt maturities between this year and 26 of $4.56 million. I'm talking about net because we also need to issue money. We need to issue for the $18.5 million that I estimate that the yearly cost is going to be about $1.5 million. We are starting to work on a new EPC that it's going to be about $3 million, and that's going to cost us about $243,000. So the net yearly savings will be $2.8 million. Are you guys following me? Yeah, good. So, next please. Based on these $2.8 million, or only scenario 1, in replacing the 2 big bonds, and based on a state aid of 30% and 40%, depending, I just have different scenarios, different maturities, and obviously different rates depending on the maturity. We have, for example, if we decide to go at 20 years and we get state aid rate of 40%, the yearly payment of the 2.536, which is the addition of the payment that we make on the 11.29 and the 17, that will give us a potential capital project of $45 million. And I'm taking into account, so you know, so I like to be conservative, that only 90% of the project will be aidable. Because in order to be aidable, the project has to be in a building, in a building where the students are learning. So for example, I believe that there's going to have to be work in the bus garage. That will not be aidable at all. So that's why I'm being conservative and saying 10% of our amount of the capital project is not going to be aidable. Okay, so here you have, then if we go to 15 years, obviously, we only have $37 million capital project. So here you have maturity differences, and obviously the rate will be different, but always the same yearly payment of $2.5 million. So that will bring no tax increase to the community.
Can I just ask, so how is the rate calculated? Is it prime plus something, or?
No. Prime is short term. This is long term. I spoke with our bankers and I asked them, we are A+ by S&P. Tell me other municipalities that have raised money in the last month or 2 months at what rate? That are A+.
So Fed funds rate has no impact on
Oh, no.
these projected rates?
This goes against the 20-year treasury. The way they market these treasuries plus.
Okay.
So the 20-year treasury plus. So Fed funds always have a little bit of influence, but not in the at the long term.
Okay.
Fed funds is always at the short term.
So this is indexed to T-bills, right, Treasury? Okay.
Yes.
All right, and just to clarify, so this is just the potential for no increase in tax, but if we decide to spend less, it could potentially be a reduction in taxes too.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what districts typically try to do is match new borrowing with retiring debt so that our tax bills and out-of-pocket stays relatively flat. So I think it was just the other day, a district somewhere around us is considering, or the board voted to go ahead with a small capital project because they had retiring debt, they had opportunities they wanted to improve their facilities, so that would be an opportunity for us as well.
But also reducing taxes for people could be an opportunity.
Oh, sure.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
You can do nothing and you reduce 4% in taxes a year.
Well, for that year, because eventually
No,
the percentage is relative to the year of budget, right?
Yeah, but it's staying if next year your taxes go down,
4%, but then they would
4%.
baseline.
Your baseline is,
Right.
let's say that your taxes were 100 today, next year is 96, your baseline is 96,
Right,
not
the baseline's
100.
96.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
okay.
the idea here, what the board wanted to see is how much can we raise, we build, without impacting the tax.
Yeah,
And in the second scenario, in the next page, I'm using all the net debt, which was $2,880,000.
What'd you say? You're using all of the what?
Net debt,
Thank you.
which is $2.8 million, having the same scenarios, and now you go to, if we're deciding to do a maturity of 20 years at 40% state rate, we can go up to $51 million. But we don't leave any price out there in case 20 years. That's the problem. But again, I just wanted to show some areas. We're much better off than what we were back in 2018 when we did the 18 and a half. Because this really, this really is putting us between $30 and $50 million today's rates.
This is really
This is
helpful.
good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Enrique.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next section tonight is audience comments on agenda items. Karen, so just Therese? All right. Therese, you know the rules around here, right? 3 minutes, and the board is here to listen, so have at it. We'll take down anything that we can't respond to, we'll be taking down, and we'll definitely close the loop with you.
Thank you. My name is Therese Sinks. I have 2 children at Blue Mountain Middle School. I've been here before. I really was hoping not to have to comment tonight. But I see elementary school transportation on the agenda, but not middle school. And I was here 3 weeks ago expressing my concern about my kids on a middle school bus. And I did not hear much about what's being done for that. So I'm not as buttoned up as I usually like to be, so forgive me. Mr. Hochreiter said that he believes there's no more than 60 children on a bus. I don't know if he was referring to elementary school. I asked Mrs. Gillio, and there are 62 children on my children's middle school bus. Now, that is what is planned for. I can tell you, the reason you are not seeing the numbers that are planned for is because parents are driving their kids in because the buses are ridiculous. They are so overcrowded, and you're not talking about little kids. You're talking about kids that are my size, kids that are bigger. They're coming on with instruments. They've got 3 binders in their backpack. They've got sports bags or whatever else they have. So I really am disappointed, to be honest, that it wasn't even a thought to address middle school specifically. And it was said at the last meeting, this was an unintended consequence, that the middle school bus runs are now impacted by the Princeton plan. And that's exactly what it is. Nobody saw this coming. I certainly didn't, which is why I kept my nose out of the whole battle around Princeton plan. But now, I really try to stay out of a lot of this stuff, but when it's impacting my kids and they're begging me to drive them to school, which I can, I have that flexibility. But on principle, I shouldn't have to. There are many parents that can't. So I'm not, again, I will say, I am not throwing the transportation team under the bus. I never would, no pun intended. But I think that they are in a rock and a hard place. They are trying to back into a number for savings or whatever in regard to the Princeton plan implementation at the cost of not only these kids, but your drivers. And I, after the last meeting, I sent a note to the board specifically asking, 1, that transportation be on the next agenda. It was, but not middle school. But 2, for metrics. Metrics from Liz. Can she tell us what is the capacity? I got it from her for my bus, 62 kids out of 72 on my kid's bus. But can we look at that broadly? Can you share that with not only the board, but the parents? Are we tracking on-time arrival and departures? How are you tracking the number of kids on each school bus that are getting on and off? Well, on really in the morning. You just said you have no idea and you need that for state funding. I don't know, start counting heads on the videos. I don't know. But my point is, there's a problem here. I'm grateful that the elementary school is being addressed because they are much younger. But it is not fair to the middle school kids to be getting on the bus and looking at a bus that is so overcrowded, and they're just like, oh, particularly the kids who get on later. So I just ask that we really look into this. And again, I go back to, If Liz is talking to the drivers, fantastic. Talk to the parents, do a survey. See if you can figure out how many kids are getting driven in. I know of 4 on my kid's bus.
Thank you, Therese.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we will circle back with Liz on middle school.
And if she could come and, or I'd be happy to talk to her. Again, I'm not throwing her under the bus, but I think we need to have some numbers here.
Yeah.
How many routes were eliminated, and what were the knock-on effects of that?
Yep.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good to see you, Therese.
You too, thanks.
Anybody else, Carmen?
Nobody else tonight.
That's it, okay. All right, so we've got through the agenda and now we're on to committee reports. Does anybody have any committee reports?
Because I do.
That is next.
Okay, I don't.
Don't worry.
Unless I have a committee report.
All part of the agenda.
So committee reports are specific to our committees that we're on. I don't know if anyone's attended any.
Jeremy and I were at the safety committee meeting. Obviously, safety, we can't go into specifically, but we met with local law enforcement and our security experts, going over a lot of the standard stuff that you have to do at the new year about some staff training, the required drills in the buildings, but then really focusing on increasing and normalizing of having the police at a drill so that they're familiar with our buildings. It was a really productive meeting.
The new technology being implemented. There was a big piece that Westchester County Police presented on some of the new technology that's been implemented and how it's beneficial. And there's a series of stages. We did stage 1, which is sort of the big broad stroke, and they were really excited, as were some of the other local police officers, like Buchanan is on our safety committee, and they were excited to see that we were taking these steps as more appropriate and in the right direction. Yeah.
Great.
It was my first committee meeting ever, I will say. I liked it. It was good. Yeah, only 50. So I'll tell you a funny story. I was patting myself on the back. I walked in. I thought I was 1 minute late, and I was like, yes, I did it. And it was actually 16 minutes late.
All right. I think that's the only committee that's actually met so far, so maybe more next time. I do have, so now we're going to move on to board comments and new business. Before we get into some NISBA, WISBA stuff that we have to go over, I just wanted to talk about I know I kind of emailed out information to the trustees about PTA meetings, and basically, long story short, the past few years there's been this like stigma of there's always a trustee as the liaison for PTA meetings, and we always try to be there and be present and pay attention to what's going on. But that's really all it is. It's been a sitting duck, really, listening and trying to be supportive, but yet not speaking on behalf of the board or taking the PTA meeting out of context and sharing it publicly and having your own perception. So I decided that as president this year, it was really important to me to meet with the PTA council. And they were very receptive to it, and they had some asks for us, which I shared with everybody and I want to share here tonight. That whoever the liaison is comes to the board meeting and participates and shares, maybe some achievements of the board or, new initiatives, how our most recent board meeting went, what's on, maybe the next agenda, if parents want to tune in or come and be present or speak. Be able to answer questions, nothing that's particular to your perspective on a policy or how you would vote on it, but simple questions. And if you don't know how to answer it, you just jot it down and we'll circle back. So I'm hopeful that everybody here is interested in more of an active role with our PTA because they're doing so many amazing things for our students throughout the year. And if anyone has any questions on their role with a particular PTA, I'm happy to talk about it later, offline, here, whatever. And the most major takeaway is that the PTA really wants to come on occasion, maybe 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring, and have an opportunity to present. I know this was like mixed feelings over the years, and it's not for any particular, one reason. It's just a matter of making sure that we're fair to everybody out there that would like to maybe have an opportunity to present. I don't know if, Joe, you have any perspective on history there, but I love the idea. I think it's a great forum for them now that we live stream and we get 200-300 viewers. So I think it's a great way to just get out some big highlights for the district. The PTA literally is one of our probably most large and active bodies. And I liked it, but I think it's important that the trustees kind of have a chance to weigh in with their opinions on this topic. So if we want to go around, if anyone has questions for me about my meeting with them, I'm happy to answer.
I'll start. As a former PTA leader for many, many years, this makes my heart very happy because the PTAs really work very diligently and very hard on programs for our students, and they work very closely with the school, and they're the biggest advocacy group for children in the country. So I think this is fantastic, and I think having this also goes with our community and building the community and the presence and all of that. So this is great.
Yeah, they were very excited about the opportunity to present to the board and the community kind of all at once, because otherwise you have to attend every single PTA meeting to find out, really what they're doing. Does anybody else want to weigh in?
I just want to make sure that we're being fair to all of our, I know that PTA has a special place because they're an advocacy group, they encompass all of our parents. But once we allow that privilege benefit to one group, we have to make sure that we're doing it, whether it's the sports booster club or the parents, there's an parents and art council. So we just need to make sure that we are keeping that door open for all of our student groups and not just the PTA.
But I think that's the whole point here, right? We're opening our meetings up so that we can get more community involvement and more presence. So this is, I think that's a great point. But we've been doing that. It's actually part of one of our board goals, right? So I think
I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to say as far as being a PTA liaison at the meeting, we have to be very careful to only speak on fact-based things. When I was at the Blue Mountain meeting last month, I talked about some of the agenda items that were going to be coming up. I introduced myself, but we can't get into anything where you're representing your personal opinion that might be in it, that might be representing the board. So I know that that's been one of the conflicts in the past.
Well, yeah, and I think you need an example with that. So being on the PTA meeting for FGL and they bring up the transportation challenges at the beginning of the year, I can't be like, oh, as the board president, I am so upset with the transportation and that type of thing. We want to make sure that we are speaking to facts and detail and not giving our opinion or our perspective, because that wouldn't be appropriate. Right.
I love the idea, and I just think that being at the Blue Mountain Middle School PTA with you, we're all parents up here. So we're Board of Ed members, but we're parents too, and we care about our kids, and we care about your kids. So when we're at those meetings, I just like to say, I'm talking as a parent, not as a Board of Ed member, and
yeah, and that's fine too. When you speak as a parent, you absolutely have every right to speak to whatever the topic is and give your opinion with your parent hat on. And it's just about being clear and communicative and making sure. I mean, a lot of the PTA folks know that we are parents and board members. So that was that. And I think also too, my experience on the board is that we ask the PTA for more than anybody. And we ask a lot of them. So this relationship and taking it to a closer, more, partnership level, I think is really, really important for the success of the school district. Corey, any thoughts?
I agree.
You're good?
Yeah.
So easy.
I think
Corey.
There's nothing else I can add to what was already said. So.
Okay, cool, awesome.
I support it, just, there's nothing else.
So I was considering reaching back out to PTA leadership to ask if they would like to prepare for November or December, what works for them. I mean, we're already in October, and I know that they'll need to figure out what their important highlights are or what they want to share with us. So if we're all in agreement, I would like to contact them.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure they're watching.
Some of them.
All right, great. So that's PTA. The next, anybody else have any new business besides the two items that are listed here? All right, so we have to get through,
Well, I have a question.
yeah?
Board comments now or after the rest of this is
What,
done?
that
I can
doesn't
wait.
matter.
I'll wait.
Okay, don't let me close the meeting. I forgot.
I promise.
Okay, so the first on here is the Area 10 Director nomination between Cheryl Brady and Deborah Gotti. I shared out both of their resumes and information on them. Also, what the Area 10 Director does. I have to vote on behalf of our district or our board in November. So if nobody feels that there's a consensus on how we go forward, we can definitely talk about this at a later meeting. But I don't know if you guys want to weigh in on who you'd like to nominate. Yeah,
I nominate Deborah Gotti.
okay. Does anybody else have a thought, opinion? This is one of those things where I have a hard time figuring it out based on paper. Ally?
I've worked with Cheryl Brady, so I was gonna nominate Cheryl. I've only ever met her virtually, but I know that she has a longstanding history working with her district and West Putt. So, because I feel like I know her, I feel like she would represent our district well.
Okay. Are there any questions that people, like, that the trustees might have that we need to answer, or I'm kind of like, I feel indifferent.
So, maybe I'm gonna sound stupid, but how does it really impact us who is nominated, and does it ultimately make a difference in the Hendrick Hudson School District?
So you gonna say something?
And it's okay if you don't, but that's my thought. 'Cause if
You
it
know
doesn't
what, I
matter-
don't know the answer to that question, but I was just looking at Deborah Gotti's resume, and I was looking at Cheryl's resume, and I was just looking at the experience level. That's the reason why I nominated Deborah Gotti. She has more years' experience in it than Cheryl. So that's where I went, and actually the format of the resume. Sorry.
I like that. It's HR. Do you have any perspective on this, like how it impacts us?
Well, in terms of the role and responsibility of the director, they're a communication vehicle. NYSBA operates like BOCES does. There are BOCES throughout the state. There's a district superintendent that works with the state, comes back and reports back. So that's sort of the job function. I think it's really about comfort level and whatever you read on their resume or whatever information you have. I know we have used West Putt, and it may have been when Cheryl was around, to advocate, especially for our school district, given Indian Point and some of the other unique financial issues that we were facing. So it's an important job, but for the most part, these areas are geographically divided, and oftentimes districts in the same geography have some of the same issues. Ours is a little unique given the enormity of Indian Point, but I think what you see is what you get, and it's a gut decision. But to answer your question, yes, these are people that we would communicate with and say, when you go to Albany or when you meet with NYSBA or so on and so forth, or we need some resources here or some support or technical expertise, they are a dot connector.
And that would be another plug for Deborah
I was
Gotti,
just gonna say that.
because she's part of Rockland with Bullline Power Plant closing. So she went through all of that. I also looked down at her PTA council, that she was the president for the PTA council from 1998 to 2005. So I think, yes, White Plains, but White Plains is very different than the Hendrick Hudson School District. So I was looking at those factors and how she would represent us.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
We should wait for Jen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We have
so
time on that, right?
We have time. I think it's like the middle of November that I
Okay.
have to fill out like an electronic ballot for Jen or whoever. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Now we have our proposed resolutions that Erica's gonna walk us through.
I'm gonna clip this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to vote on, there's two parts of this. New York State School Board Association has proposed 43 resolutions. And there is a book that coincides with this. It's in the board docs for anyone that wants to read it or review it. And they put WSBA, the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, then met and discussed all 43 resolutions, and they came to a consensus. And in this document that you're looking at right now, it says whether they had a meeting, WSBA had a meeting consensus, and then we have to vote on each one. So how we're going to do this, and just to give everyone a little idea on the timeline here. There is the New York State School Board Association's annual business meeting is coming up next week on Monday. And we have appointed Jen Bacher on behalf of the board to cast our one vote for our district. So, and we have all previewed all of this ahead of time. So there are certain things that we may want to discuss as a board on the table that we have questions on for clarification. We can also abstain from, no decision. We can have no decision if we can't come to a consensus. It's a yes or a no. So I don't think this should take us very long to do. But what I'd like to do is I have to read this, and I'm gonna start. And anyone.
You have to start first.
Yeah, and anyone after we start, anyone that has any of these that they want to flag and discuss, they're all numbered. So.
So as you go number one, if we have a question, are we saying it again or just circle it?
We're just going to go back. I think you guys are going to just go back to going to do.
Okay.
It's all up there. So.
Okay.
All right. Proposed resolutions
Motion
amendment.
to waive reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So now you're gonna move through like number one, since we can all read and follow along with you?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I want to read all of these, right? That's the whole thing.
No,
No, but you
don't
can just
have to
say
read
number
them.
one, and then,
We're going to
Well,
vote.
if unless you disagree with what they're proposing, right? So each recommendation has whether they're opposed or whether there's support or whether they oppose.
Yes.
So if you disagree with any support or oppose, that's what we should talk about.
and the three
Right.
no decisions we can talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about them, you can do it out of order, and it should make it easy for everybody. All this stuff is available on board docs for any of the public that wants to read about this, but we already had these in advance and we've already reviewed these.
Yeah, the
in
public has
advance.
had them in advance as well.
So, for example, 8
Well-
and 9,
Right.
were we opposed to those based on?
We have to vote. I think we have to vote. So I'm going to do what Ally is saying. I'm going to say one, and we're
Okay.
going to vote. And if we can't vote, we're going to,
Talk about it?
Yes.
Okay, good, let's do it.
one.
So the vote's gonna be support or not support?
Mhm.
Okay.
Support or
Support
oppose?
opposed, okay.
Support or oppose?
Support or oppose.
Okay.
Not no decision?
We can do no decision, but no decision is, like, you're abstaining from voting, which is fine. If you have no opinion, you have no opinion. Right?
But we need 4 to move forward.
We need 4 to move forward. All right, so number 1,
Support.
Oppose.
support.
No decision.
Yeah, I'm over here.
With no decision or oppose?
I don't know.
So I oppose it because it's an unfunded mandate. I think this is a great
It's
project.
actually not.
It
It's
says
fully funded.
Fully state-funded arts and
It's
music
fully state
education
funded.
as a common, yeah.
I oppose it because there's a teacher shortage, and these are the teachers that you are the hardest to find, because no one went into these jobs because of why they want to mandate it, because they're the first to go when there's problems with budgets. So you mandate this. How about you can't find a teacher for it? Try to find a home and careers teacher right now.
This is music and arts.
Yeah.
Music and arts.
It's music,
You're gonna
but
need
it's
the Easter
music.
Bunny
But
first.
this is specifically music and arts.
Yeah, but I'm telling you right now, when you're looking for elective teachers, and someone in human resource could back me up on this, these are very hard to find. So you mandate this, and then you don't have the teacher to put in there. I'm for it. I'm all for arts and music, but it being mandated, once you mandate something, you're not going back from it. And right now, that mandate, You're not finding these teachers out there right now.
So we can do SA, support if amended, maybe that it's fully funded but not mandated.
But
It
it
is
says it
fully
in there.
funded.
It says fully funded.
No,
No, but
it says fully funded and mandated. So the amendment would be support, right? So what I'm saying is there's 4 choices at the top of the page, right? Support if amended, oppose, or no decision. So if you can
It doesn't-
support the resolution if amended, and the amendment would be that it's fully funded but not mandated, then it
Yeah.
sounds like that covers
Yep.
all angles here. So when we have the access to the teacher, we can, and then we're not deficient if we don't have someone to cover the
Doesn't
class.
say anything
It
about
says
mandated.
mandate. I don't read
Doesn't
anything
say
about-
mandated at all.
It says fully funded arts and music education program as a common school branch incorporated into the public school curriculum to provide a more well-rounded education for children. It probably doesn't even have an impact on this district.
It all
But it
could.
would be
We
more
have
so,
it.
because we already have it. It would be more so for those other schools across the state that don't have it. And I think that would be absolutely fantastic for them, because we have a great arts and music program.
Yep.
They might not.
You see, but when I look at this and read, the first line says, "It is not a statutory requirement. As a result, during times of fiscal difficulties, school districts, they reduce arts and music." When
They're
you
trying to
read,
protect
We're
the
talking about
program.
Hen Hud only.
And-
We're only talking about for us to vote, we're only talking about Hen Hud
Okay.
only. So we went through the biggest crisis that we're gonna see, and we didn't cut a single music, right?
you don't know about.
Well,
No,
No, we preserved, right? We've been preserving. Our music department's pretty strong here.
And then in the end, maybe this would end up giving us money for a
yeah.
program that we're already funding. This would give us state funding.
Yes.
Part of the issue here is that arts and music instruction and standards are mandated. Those standards being taught by a certified art and music teacher is not mandated. And so what some districts have done is to say, well, we don't have enough money to pay for a kindergarten and first grade art, but students are entitled to art instruction. And so they find different ways to do it. This may be requiring, I'm looking at the asterisks on the very last page.
Talk about mandates.
Yeah, that it talks about mandating it as a perhaps certified teacher. I don't know enough about
It's not-
I don't know enough about the resolution and why Duchess Post is providing it. I can tell you that certified art and music teachers teach all our children.
I think as written, I totally, I'm coming full circle and I'm almost there with you with supporting it, but I don't think it's written well.
Yeah, well, that's not for us to say,
Yeah.
right? That's not up for us to say. But
Yeah.
that's also, I mean, that's where the if amended comes in, right? Right, if we don't like the way it's worded. Like, there's one in here that I don't like, I can tell you right off the bat, the wording of it was bad.
So what should we do about this one? Stick with,
I think we should vote on, okay, who supports it? Who supports it if it's amended?
maybe,
There you
So I
go.
think that's our answer.
Well,
Okay.
not yet.
okay, cool.
This is gonna be
Whoa,
If we-
there's
if
a lot
this is
there,
like-
okay.
Can we just focus on the ones where we
Yes.
disagree with the
Yes, that's what we're
recommendation?
doing.
Okay.
That's what we're gonna do.
Thank you.
So two.
It'll be a very long
Two.
night.
We're good.
Two, we should vote two.
Oh,
Oh,
so we're
We
voting for
have to,
support?
we have to just show.
support, good.
Okay. Three,
Support.
I'm trying to take notes.
four, support.
Support.
Five, support.
What was your hand, Steph?
Yes.
Six, support. Seven, support. Eight was one that, eight is one that they opposed bylaw amendment of resolution. NYSBA supports universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds statewide. So who supports this? Who supports it with, if it's amended? Who oppose?
Isn't it already?
Nope. Not at all. Not even close.
It's just because we got the federal
We
funding.
got $138,000 or $134,000.
But it's not funded by the state, that was federal funding.
You've got to look at number 28.
Yeah, they're connected, and that's another one that's opposed.
Okay.
If they're
Or,
opposed, right?
yeah, 28 is,
No, it's not 28.
yeah.
That was the,
It is 28.
Oh, 28.
Equitable.
Yeah, but what is that? Is that
Yeah, what is it?
equitable, like,
So that
everyone
we
gets
down-
the same, or everybody gets what they need to fund a
Equity is
program?
everybody gets what they need. So in more.
Yeah, I think the difference is mandating that you must do it versus making sure you have the funding necessary to do it if you choose.
Yeah, I'm not for mandating. They don't support mandates fully.
Okay, no. I don't know, not in that one. So who's, we're at opposed. Who's opposed? 9 was another one that we had some questions on, and they have an O. Ms. Michelle petitioned New York State Education Department and the Commissioner thereof to include as mandatory prerequisite to being employed by a school district in the state of New York as a licensed security guard that said individual receives as part of their training and licensure a separate and specific credential signifying training and knowledge of laws, rules, and regulations applicable to schools. And this had to do with training. They're not trained specifically in this, and this is, it's all explained in the book.
Just so the school district would then have to pay for that training for each employee?
Yes.
Plus, we have to fingerprint them.
That's already done at their security. That's done.
Right, but this is a whole added expense. That's gonna,
Yeah, because you don't know what training.
It's an unfunded, so what's the star on this one?
It's that, you don't know what the
I forget
training
what it
is
was.
gonna be. And, I mean, you have no idea. It's
Well,
committing to.
I have a question. Why does the school have to pay for it? Like, the school doesn't pay for your teacher certification, you pay for that if you want to be a teacher,
But we
right?
pay for the training, for like the safety team training or training for,
But if you want to be a licensed security guard, then you need to pay for the courses for you to be able to achieve that level of a profession.
yes. And if I have that certification, you're gonna pay me more. And you're probably not paying them what they would make, say, at Indian Point as a licensed security guard.
that's the issue. The issue here is there's not enough information that they're saying on the asterisks, no one knows how much training we're talking about.
Yes.
ND with amendments?
That's the issue.
What do you
So
say,
this one
Mark?
is support.
The first problem here is that that will be a civil service job. For civil service, this will be completely different in Westchester than in Putnam, than in any other one. And for us, that doesn't matter because our school resource officers, they get the training at the Westchester County to be school resource officers. My opinion, this doesn't matter to us.
So are
we
we
can
ND?
oppose.
We're going to be ND?
ND.
ND.
ND, we consensus on ND?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Number 10,
Support?
Support.
support. Number 11,
Support?
number 12,
Support?
support. Number 13,
uh,
we had some questions on
Okay.
this.
We get, like, that was when we were like, isn't that already a law?
Yeah.
It's kind of strange.
Support, just.
Yeah.
Support.
I oppose, because now you might think like I'm some creepy person over here, but I'm gonna say, if it said knowingly in here, but think of your young teacher who's 21, who doesn't know all the students, and I'm telling you, I taught at Henhud. I remember being in Folgums with kids with fake IDs in there when I was 22.
So you would support this?
If it said the word knowingly, if it said that the worker had to know, for a district employee knowingly, there's a lot of times that people misrepresent their age.
Yeah.
With the current student in the district, regardless of age and consent, that's what it's saying. So if the student is 18 or 19, they would still be
matter.
prohibited, they would make it a felony for doing that, even if they were adult or
Right.
of age of consent.
Yeah, the problem there is,
support this.
well, just,
I don't
can I
know.
ask one question? If you are a teacher aide in kindergarten, you have no idea that there's a student who's a senior you can be a student at 20 years old in public school in New York State. yes?
Actually, they extended it because of the pandemic, I
21.
believe it's
So you could be a
23 or
20-year-old
24.
teacher aide in kindergarten classroom. You could meet someone who's 21, you're a senior, and go to jail.
18.
But I'm saying you could even meet someone who's 21, your senior, and go to jail.
With a current student in the district,
Yeah.
regardless of
they're-
age.
they're-
That's my
current
point.
student.
So a 20-year, 1-year-old senior, just think about the law for a minute, right? I'm not saying that what I support. What I'm saying is, think about this. You could be a 21-year-old student, and you could be a 20-year-old teacher aide.
Yeah.
You could meet someone in a bar, have no idea that they're in your district. What's a big district? New Rochelle,
But how do
right?
you prove it one
Yonkers.
way or the other? It's coming from a.
You don't, that's
That's
why.
the point. So
that's
you don't
the
want to give
point.
someone a felony
So
because you
maybe
can't prove
you
that
add
they
some work.
knowingly.
in that.
That's it.
Knowingly.
Knowingly.
Well,
Like, you know that they're,
you can't prove knowingly, right? There's no way to prove knowingly.
they're in your class.
Yeah.
You're a coach. I'm a coach
You
and
can
you're
say, I
in
didn't know.
Yeah,
Right?
if I'm
There's no-
coaching you.
Legally, there's no way to
But see-
prove knowingly. It's
Okay.
that's a very.
So then you need to put someone in
It's
jail
just
for
current
that.
student in the district, not necessarily in your classroom.
Right.
And it's also a felony, which I think is.
And you lose your license and you, listen, the intent of the law, I'm
Well,
totally
not
for the
not
intent of the law.
necessarily. You would have to do a Part 84, and New York State would have to determine if you
And-
lose your license. The state education department can only pull a license.
I mean, the intent of the law is there, and I get the intent of it, but I think that you're going to, you're.
Unintended consequences. You
There's
got to
not-
think about
And there's
it.
no gray area, you just told me, you can't prove knowingly, there's no, it's either
can't.
black or white. So even if you didn't know, and his situation happened, I have a felony.
Well, it's not really my situation. The one that the one that we just sort of painted here is a picture for the record. Okay.
18 shades of red, that's
Oh God.
I
I can only imagine what's going on in the.
Are we saying that we support this with, so who supports it?
did. I get what Jeremy's saying,
I
but
did too, and now I get kind of what they're saying, but at the same time, I mean, if there's a 21-year-old student in the district, the teachers are probably going to know, because there probably aren't that many of those, right?
No way.
that's not.
We got teachers who don't know each other here.
Yeah, I get that, but
So-
wouldn't they know that if there's
No way.
a student?
No.
they
If
would
you
know?
are an elementary school teacher, why would you know who's?
You wouldn't know.
So here's the other thing. This is what my question was on the form, I think. At the end of the day, the district could have a policy to terminate you, but I don't know that you should make it a felony. That's a pretty severe,
We can't have a policy. It's got to go through.
you can't have
It's
a
gonna be covered
policy
under
that disallows
community
anyone
contracts,
employed by the
probably.
district to date a student?
That you can have.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
terms of leading to, but even, you can have a policy on it, but in terms of discipline or termination, you've got to go through the
The challenge,
state,
yeah.
existing state
Yeah.
process. Violating
Which you would have to
policy
do with a
would-
felony anyway, right?
Well, but we don't do law enforcement. They've got to
Yeah.
determine
Yeah,
what's a crime.
I don't think I
We
can
don't
support
determine
that.
what's a crime.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
All right, so
who
let's
supports
vote.
this as it is? Who
I think
supports-
with amendments, we don't know
With
what the
amendments.
amendments
So
are.
who
but
supports it with amendments?
In principle, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfectly
Right?
agreed.
It does.
In
100%.
principle, it makes sense.
100%.
Who's opposed? So
Like,
I would say.
in
no-
context,
no-
I don't want any,
I would say support with amendments.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
When they support it with
I
amendments.
wouldn't oppose it.
When they support it with amendments, we get to vote it on again?
Again, right?
See, I don't think so. I think you are voting on this
Oh, then
language.
I am
Otherwise,
opposed.
we're going to be here all night
Okay.
picking
I-
and saying.
I'm going with my
I
opposed.
would
I'm
say
opposed.
then it's a no.
It's an
The essay, the key up here is that.
I would
that
say
the-
ND. I wouldn't say.
You want this?
I would say
Okay.
ND, not opposed.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Everyone has to agree though on that.
So
Yeah,
ND
or
is
just
the
vote.
decision.
That's what
Do you want to
I would-
abstain or do you want to oppose it? Those are two different things.
Yeah, I oppose, but there's 6 people here, so.
Well,
it'll-
you oppose,
I oppose.
I oppose.
I would probably done no decision.
I vote no decision.
I would oppose.
Okay, so
That's
that's
four.
four.
That's four.
Okay.
14 were yes. 15. We had questions on this, and they have it as an O, which is that they opposed the bylaw. So but they did it with an asterisk. So just to clarify this, it was difficult for all special ed parents to afford a trained advocate. So that was WSBA's comment on here, and why they opposed it, because this is supporting a special ed advocate.
Unfunded mandate is what you're saying.
No, because a parent advocate isn't paid, right? I mean, Lisa, parent advocate for special ed, that's not something that we would pay for, that's something a parent would bring in.
Parent pays that, yeah.
So then, if not every parent could afford it.
That was.
And it's all sliding scale. If you're talking an advocate, educational advocate versus a lawyer. So they'll go to, typically in Elmsford, there's someone that does it on a sliding scale.
Based on your income.
I feel like I don't have enough
I don't
information
have
on
enough.
that.
I don't have enough.
Yeah.
So-
Well, you're voting on the language.
So yeah, we're voting on the language. So who supports this? Who supports it with amendment? Who opposes it? I think that's where we are. Okay. 16.
I support it.
no.
Oh, sorry.
I oppose.
I oppose.
Yeah.
I support it, and I'm going to say that I support it because I think it would increase diversity in Board of Education members. And right now, there is no diversity. I think that that's just my opinion, but that's it.
And I'm going to comment, just because Jen had made some comments, and I don't want to speak for her, but her comment on it was, you know, if this was something that was agreed upon, then we could, the person that, like, let's say I wanted to donate my money back to the school, I could do that. I could, you know, pay it forward. And I think, like you said, it does bring more people possibly to the table. Possibly to the table.
Yeah, but my opinion on that is like so strong in the other direction. I think that you really want people here serving the community out of their complete free will with no money tied to it.
No ties.
And then you
Total
become
independence.
biased by, you know, by the money and by your connection because it's a paid job. So I'm a hard oppose.
I agree with that, but the stipend that they're going to give you
I mean, I would like
is
it.
probably going to be.
It doesn't specify that.
It's
Stipend
true.
is
And those
very
are
vague.
usually locally decided, so you would pass a resolution
To
to
pay
pay
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah.
Sort of like a local,
See,
like town does, right? And next thing you know, it's $2,000 and it's $10,000. No, I'm out.
Well, they couldn't
Yeah.
come, they couldn't come to a decision at the table on this themselves, WISBA. So we can, anyone support it?
I support it.
Anyone opposed to it? Okay. 17?
Support?
Support.
Support. 18?
Support.
Support.
Oh,
Well, I don't support that.
18. Oh, sorry.
18?
18, I am fully for the veterans, but what if you're in a town that has a tremendous amount of veterans?
Well,
You're getting
This
reimbursed.
is
You get
getting
state
reimbursed.
reimbursement, so it's not on the town.
So the
This is-
town doesn't have to pick
they're-
that up?
No, not
What
in
they're
this.
saying is the state will reamburse the
that
district
what they're
for
saying?
tax
Yes.
exempt.
Okay, I
veterans.
support, sorry.
Support.
Yeah, support.
19? Support.
Yeah,
Support.
20?
hang on.
They couldn't come to a decision on this one either, at the table.
I support.
I was no on this one.
I'm
This
a
is
no.
not a school board of ed
Yeah.
thing, this
Yeah.
is
This
politics.
Agree.
Yeah.
That was my
That's how
comment.
I
No
felt.
politics.
Jeremy, yeah.
Me too.
So I'm a no. And who supports it?
I do.
Who's a no?
Do you want to speak to yours, Corey?
I had a cousin in Parkland.
Okay.
21?
Support?
Support.
Support.
22? Support.
Yep, we're halfway there.
23? Who supports?
Support.
Jeremy, you okay?
24? Supports.
Support. I'm trying to count votes, sorry.
25?
Support.
Support.
Support. Wait. Yes.
Did you guys memorize these, or am I
I did. I
really
went
slow
through all of
reading?
them 3 times.
I have my
26? Support.
Support.
27?
Support.
Support. 28? Support.
Wait,
Oh, that was
Wait, wait, wait.
that was related to the other one.
Yeah, 28's connected to the.
Right, so that was the
Okay.
one where this is the equitable funding, where if you choose to have a pre-K program, you will receive funding equitable to your costs. Right
Yes.
now, pre-K funding is a flat rate across the state, obviously.
Yep.
Yes,
It doesn't
support.
go as far some places.
29? Support. 30? Support. 31?
Support.
Support. 32? Support. Now, the next few are ones that that New York State is recommending, but the Westchester Putnam School Board group opposed. So I'm just going to go through these, and we can talk if we need to. 33? Who supports it?
That's political.
Yeah, agree, political.
Who's a no?
Okay, so oppose?
34?
Again,
Wait,
political.
It's not our
That's-
issue.
Yeah.
Oppose.
But that doesn't,
35?
but for free, got it.
Who supports this?
This is a Board of
No.
Health.
Yeah, it's a Board of Health issue.
Well-
That was our big issue, like, it was, we were told what to do, let's keep it as being
Yeah.
told what to do.
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
but, so hold on. If you disagree with the state, you have no choice?
Well, it's basically that, this relates to the pandemic. If you look at the districts that recommended, these were districts that wanted to have local control over quarantine, mask mandates, social distancing, so on and so forth. So they wanted to basically ask for local control in terms of communicable illnesses. And I think what NISBA is saying is we oppose that because that's not the core competency of a school district, is to be the health department. You have a health department for a reason. The health department makes recommendations or enforces decisions. I think what NISBA is saying is, should an elected school board determine whether masks are good, bad, or whether social distancing is
But
correct?
what if you wanted to follow local health experts?
We are, all you
Well,
need
it's-
is-
Local follows.
So the local is the county.
Oh,
In this
Yeah, but what
case,
if-
the local is the county.
so.
They're asking,
nobody can-
No, it says and/or regional. So if the county does something different than the state, we would follow the county? That would be more specific to where we live?
we did that.
yeah, we did that.
Okay.
Yep.
Does anyone support?
I still struggle with this a little bit, I'll
Well,
be
then
honest with you.
you don't have to,
Then oppose it.
I am.
who
Well,
supports?
Wait,
you support
Support
it.
opposing?
Who supports it?
You would want to support.
I would support that, yes.
I think that I would support it too.
So the reality is you can always choose to follow them, you just don't have to, right? I like the
But we would
opportunity.
have, but this body would have to make policies as to what we would not, what we don't want. We would pick and choose. The health department say you got to do these 10 things. This would allow the school board to pick and choose what of the 10 we want to do and why we want to do them or why we don't.
And you want
what
that
we would do.
liability, if you make the wrong call, when you're making your local decision and you make the wrong call.
I don't think
you
we have liability as school board members in that
Absolutely.
regard.
The
No,
The
organization.
school district does.
The
The
district.
district.
Oh,
And I think we're all
Okay.
bonded, aren't we?
Yeah.
okay,
Yes,
all
I'm not saying
right.
personally, but I'm
No,
saying in
I-
general.
okay.
The issue is, should a school board be making health decisions? That's really the issue, and that it was born out of the state and federal lawsuits over who can mandate.
So from a, okay, got it. I
Yeah.
understand how the
I
board's
get it.
voting, I'm still putting my little personal vote differently, which I also understand and agree with your position, so you're letting me off the hook easy.
So we had 4 opposed. I was opposed to oppose.
Opposed.
Steph, what are your vote?
I was opposed.
Okay.
Thanks.
37?
No, it was 36. Oh, sorry. No, I'm behind. Sorry.
Wait, no, we're
No,
on.
No, we're on
36.
36.
Oh, 30.
We're on
36.
Okay.
36, yes.
What?
I don't, it's
I
so
don't-
poorly
what is
worded, I'm
this?
just going to oppose it.
Yeah, that's a yes.
Does anyone support this?
No.
Well,
I like it was written in the negative.
You know what? I get what they're trying to write here, and I'm not completely opposed to it, but it is not worded.
It's not worded well.
Yeah,
Double
fair.
negative.
Yeah.
so I will support with amendments.
You were what?
Supporting it?
Support with an amendment.
Support with an
Well,
amendment.
I'm gonna go
We
with
can't-
They're not gonna amend it. Dennis will vote on Monday.
Yeah, this is the vote.
Yeah.
This is the language.
Yeah, so-
We don't get to offer our edits.
So who supports this, as it is? Who opposes it?
I'm abstaining, because I don't understand it enough. Yeah.
I am too.
That's why
Yeah.
I'm opposing it, because I don't understand it enough.
Well, I'm gonna
Yeah, I don't
put
wanna
no
take a
what they're
decision
trying
in
to
there.
say.
So you want to know, so who's an NA on this?
Is that abstaining?
What is NA?
Or no,
No decision, ND,
ND.
sorry. Who's an,
I'm
I
not-
think,
Wait, does this say that
I'm
if?
just opposed to
but-
it,
Yeah.
like, if they said it in a way that was clear,
Mhm.
and then we said no decision, okay, but it's so unclear,
right.
how can you support something like
So
that?
we're-
I'm just opposed.
I'm opposed.
I'm opposed.
okay,
Yeah.
we're opposed. 38?
On I'm opposed.
Anyone in support of this, as it is?
I didn't realize that that went away.
So this means that if you have a
It's a
religious
law.
exemption, you are going to be obligated to be vaccinated in some capacity?
I mean, it's our,
We already have to.
You already have to?
There's no
Yeah.
national exemption in New York State.
Kids have to have the
That was 3 years-
polio, they
that
have
was
to have
3
the
years ago.
MMR.
Oh, but that's
They have to
new.
have
I'm
their
not- I just didn't, but that's
3
new.
years ago.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, new to me, but yeah, okay.
Wait, so this,
I'm opposed.
the committee found value in
So-
continuing to uphold longstanding student vaccination requirements and the health and safety of student interests. The committee also recognized that current law permits medical exemptions to those required. So basically, the medical exemptions already exist.
Right,
Yes.
if you
Right.
can't, like, let's say you're allergic to eggs and the only delivery method is through an egg-based compound.
Yeah.
It's
You
already.
get a medical exemption for that.
Okay.
Not a religious.
What's that?
Not religious.
Not religious.
Non-religious, correct.
Okay.
Non-religious, a medical exemption you can get. You
Yeah.
can't get a
Okay.
religious.
Then
All
I'm
right,
good.
what are we voting?
Who supports
But-
this?
I don't know. I don't, be honest with you.
I'm opposed.
Yeah, that's good. I'm good with that.
39. Who supports 39?
Wait,
We oppose 38. 39.
I don't know what that means.
what, me either. I don't get it.
It's written in
So
here and
I
it's not
oppose
written
this.
clear.
So what they're saying is, they want you to oppose legislation that would eliminate single occupancy zoning, which means you could make any community a multifamily community. You could add apartments to any
Oppose.
house. No, wait, no, hold
oh, I'm
on.
reading it.
So is that a double negative? So you need to support, no, yeah, you need to oppose, you
Yeah.
would, if you don't like that rule, you would oppose this, because this is saying to,
That would eliminate.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so we want to
Who
oppose.
supports
We
it?
want, you want to,
No, I oppose.
Who opposes it?
Oppose.
Yeah.
Okay, we're almost done. 40. Who supports this? Who is opposing it? Okay. 40.
I'm a no decision. on that.
Wait, hold on a minute. Oppose legislation that would require,
Well, I think they're saying sexuality education for K through 12, where I think we started in, what, 6th grade?
yeah, so,
7th grade?
so if we
Yeah.
oppose
That's
the
more
opposition,
appropriate.
then that means we support it, right?
Oppose legislation that would require school districts to adopt a comprehensive,
Yeah, so
we
I
would
would,
support that.
I mean, if you think that they shouldn't do that in kindergarten, then probably, right? So if you oppose it, you'd be opposing the opposition.
Really? Because I feel like they say opposing.
I feel like it's written terribly.
Oh, no, you're right, because they say NISBA support proposal, so.
NISBA should oppose any legislation that would require sexual education for K through 12
Yeah.
students.
So,
Do we want them to
So we support
oppose
the
any
opposition.
Education that, yeah, so we support it.
I
We don't
support
oppose
it.
it.
I support it.
We support the opposition.
Yes, we
Yes.
support the opposition.
So in this one would, if we're, I'm not putting any words in anyone
No.
else's mouth,
No.
but it's what
So
it sounds like.
Who supports it as it's written?
I support it.
we support it.
Support.
Okay, okay. 41.
Oppose.
I'm gonna go to read 41, where why
Okay.
WISBA decided not to mandate this, or decided not to support it.
Yeah, I see, because it's a statewide mandate versus an individual.
It's
So there's-
taking
there's
your,
unintended
taking your
consequences.
local ability away.
Yeah,
So
oppose.
we oppose that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still want a later
Me
start
too.
time for
I
high
do too.
schools, for high school students, but I don't want them telling me I have to do that. I'd rather do it.
So, all opposed?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
opposed.
Okay. 42.
Changes in the law ruling or allowing school districts to develop suitable substitute tests instead of regions.
Does this mean that the
Give
school
them a-
districts want to make the test?
So the school districts want to give,
School districts want to
Alternate.
give local exams for
Instead of Regents
students
diplomas.
who are exhibiting stress or having a hard time taking a Regents exam. So a locally developed Regents equivalency.
So
My guess is this is opposed because now you're going back to 700 school districts having 700 different regents equivalency tests, and you've
That
now
would be a
lost your
nightmare.
standard.
Yes.
I oppose it.
Opposed?
I don't know how I feel, so I'm not voting.
I,
Because we're teaching the individual learner. That doesn't take that into account, right?
Right.
but do we, okay, before we finish voting on this, because I think this is I thought the same thing. I think it's the issue is, I think we already, everyone has to have a Regents diploma, but we have things within Hen HUD that support students, and make sure that we're all,
They're basically saying, rather than take a Regents exam, each school district can create their own exam where students can take a school district exam and not a Regents exam, but get credit for the Regents exam.
So then you could lower your standards to
Yeah, you're
increase your
lowering your
graduation.
standards to,
Okay, no, I
Students
oppose
can already
that.
get accommodations
That's
through
what
Thank you.
504s
Yep,
and IEPs.
perfect. Thank
So
you.
there's no reason
Good.
why we have to create a separate
Yep,
exam for them.
I'm with it. Thank you. That makes sense.
so we're all opposed.
Yep.
Okay. And 43.
I don't understand it. I oppose
What
it.
does this mean? Yeah, but you're opposed.
It's like,
I don't get what
come
they're
on, we're
saying.
educators. Can't we write sentences?
There's been a lot of these.
I give up on that one.
Maybe they should have not had
supports this?
43 and been
I do
I don't know what it is.
really good.
Okay.
oppose
Who
it.
opposes?
Oppose.
Okay.
Wait,
Wait,
Yeah.
hold
No,
on.
Jeremy had
I
something
did.
before you close.
and, but we're not closing because we also have to just do our goals, so if you want to do the goals,
You whatever. Well, so this coincides,
okay.
and
Is it pertaining to one of these?
yep. Well, sort of.
Do you want to talk about it when we get to that goal?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so our board goals,
The board goals were fine, we had no edits.
okay, so those we're just.
We can approve, we had no edits when we.
Okay, so our district goals, we had to wordsmith a little bit. We didn't change the goal entirely, just sort of dates or how we wanted to present it. So the first goal, do you want me to read them? Okay. The district will identify.
Motion to waive reading?
Well, the only thing is,
I think it's important.
Corey just loves that. I think it's the date thing that we want to make sure everyone's comfortable with, so I'll go fast. The district will identify and announce specific metrics of success for the implementation of the Princeton Plan before the last Board of Education meeting in 2022. Benchmark data will be collected and presented by June 2023.
So this one was a little bit of wordsmithing, but mostly we wanted to make sure that we get this calendared as soon as possible, no later than the end of the year. And so depending on when Joe and his team and staff members can get all the data together to be presented in one cohesive unit, it could be earlier than the last, right, Joe, potentially, depending on
Our last meeting is middle of December, I think.
December 16th or December 2nd is the one before then. So that was the only thing that we really changed on that.
So I asked at the last meeting when this topic came up that the goal for the Princeton Plan was savings only. And I asked, and I understand that there's time to put these things together, but we had a presentation today and the gentleman was Armand, right, indicated that part of this building assessment plan, he's going to take into consideration the Princeton Plan and how that building changes may be required. I'm not comfortable asking someone to put time and effort into that if it turns out that this Princeton Plan didn't save us any money. And as a result, I don't know why we would wait any longer than the next meeting to do an analysis of the cost of both UPK and the Princeton Plan from a projected versus an actual savings. I don't understand how we could continue to push forward if we don't look at that now.
I don't think he could do how he's going to change those buildings too, and put up a bond for that if we didn't get what you're asking
Yeah,
for.
agree.
Before we get any more information on that.
Correct. I think it's all intertwined, and it's October. Is that unrealistic to be able to look at the financials there, Enrique?
Is there a cost Like, how much is it costing him to consider the Princeton plan stuff in there? In other words, he might be able to just give us options and say, if you continue with the Princeton plan, here's what you should do and what it
Yeah.
would cost. And then we just take that into account when we start to think about the future.
Perfect, but it's still to point one, why do we have to wait to talk about the cost of something that's already happened? We've
But
now
it's not-
found out that buses.
It's not just the cost.
It's the
We're looking at
metrics.
all the, we talk about social emotional learning, whether academic scores, so it's not,
But-
our metrics of success aren't just that one data point.
Well, the cause of implementation was solely finance.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Joe,
It was,
wait,
it was
wait.
what we originally started, so it was the trigger, but then when I voted on it, it wasn't just about finance, because the other board members who were in support of it came and convinced me, and, you know.
But that's
took the
counter to
time.
Joe, right? Because Joe told us that the Princeton plan at like Frank G, when we went and did the meeting, and the follow-ups were that the districts are very evenly. We talked about the free and reduced lunch, and that the percentage at Furnace Woods was even 30%, and that there was a very even distribution of socioeconomic throughout the district. So the entire presentation, and I was on the Princeton Plan Committee, right? So what you decided was not necessarily based upon
What we
the
discussed.
presentation of the Princeton Plan justification. I'm not rehashing that. All I'm saying is, the reason that we were told we were doing this was solely for money, 1.9 or 2.1 to 1.2 to whatever we ended up. And I'm not comfortable sitting here and talking about all of these potential goals when the reason we did it was for money. That was the reason it was presented. That's the reason that it was sold. That's the reason that the community bought in. It was all about savings. And I would like to understand, like yesterday, where we are in terms of the savings. We have Therese mentioning that there's fewer,
Grace.
I'm sorry, Therese, I apologize. It's-
Transportation would be a metric in there, right?
Yeah, but
So-
we also have fewer buses to BMMS now, potentially. Where does that go? We now added 2 buses into this, which means really we need to take the cost from in Anthony's budget and apply that to the transportation budget, which we were told was going to be flat, because we now have people working in a building 2 fewer hours a day. On an 8-hour day, it's 25% less work.
I think that there's, to me, I feel like there's 2 separate things. This goal here is great, and there are definitely, there's no denying that there are metrics to success that need to be measured for Princeton Plan, but what you're asking for, and you're asking for, and you're asking for, and I'm asking for, is completely separate. We just want to know where we are to date with what we had anticipated in terms of savings, right? So that we can make decisions and thought process moving forward. So I think that it's connected, but I do think that there is some separation in terms of, there should be a list of success, metrics to success for the implementation, because there's so many things that go into it, right? But this financial question is more evaluating how we're looking, how things are going, what we promised the community, are we there? And if not, how do we make decisions going forward? So I do think that it's the same, but also not.
I also think at the end
I
of the
think
day.
we need both. That's what I'm saying. I think we need both.
But at the end of the day, December 15th seems like just seems far. I know it's not really far away, but it is far away. I would like to advocate for pushing that forward, all of it, as much as possible.
But you won't have student metrics, like how did they perform during the year?
Of course you do. They're
until the
doing
end of the year.
F&Ps now. Benchmark.
Okay.
No,
It's
it's
not
not
that.
it's not the information, it's
Right.
the
It's
metrics
the
on what
metrics.
we're gonna be using.
Yes, they're doing
Right.
their benchmark testing right now in the schools for the beginning
But
of the
you have
school
to
year.
so that data.
We
has
don't
to
need the
be-
data. We just need to know what those metrics are going to be. That's the part we don't have right now.
Oh, so you're
We
saying,
don't even know
what
what they
are the
are.
qualifiers?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what this goal is, right? This goal really is, what are the specific metrics? That's
But
why,
separate from this, what
But this
Jeremy
is
need to find
benchmark
out.
data, not benchmark.
We're not, I don't think we're worried about the second half of it. We're looking at
Right.
the first
And I
half.
think we talked about this when we talked about this goal, that we were going to have metrics before the end of the year, before the
And
end
they're
of
saying
this
that
year.
that's not soon.
it's not soon enough.
Right.
It's just not soon enough.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
that- I don't even know what the metrics are.
That's what I'm saying.
I just think that's a little odd to not have the metrics at this point.
That's
When you
where
make
I'm
that
at with
big of a
this. To be
change,
honest, that's where I'm at.
Usually that comes before.
I thought I was
I'm
clear.
not gonna argue that.
I honestly, I thought I was pretty clear at the last meeting about this, that we cannot wait till December 15th to establish metrics as a school community.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
We have metrics in place.
I know that, that's the whole point.
Okay,
So
so-
why are we waiting until the end of December?
I don't know what you think we're waiting for. I'm confused.
This is this is where I'm
Well,
trying
then-
I
to.
can
can we
tell
say
you what
for
the
the next
metrics
board
are right
meeting?
now.
But your metrics, but we need to have a comprehensive presentation
We get that,
of,
yes, we
of
get that.
all of that.
It's
What are we
clear.
going to measure to determine whether the Princeton plan was successful?
So
That's
you're
that's
gonna
what we
look
need to
at
see.
ac-
There's no
you're not
academic
talking about
change
money,
for the
but
Princeton
You're
plan.
going to look at academics, you're going to
Yep.
look at attendance, you're going to look at referrals for behavior.
Yep, so we're just
You're gonna look
looking
at
for
SEL data.
that list.
How many kids
Yeah.
left the
That's what I'm
district
saying.
versus how
So
many
we're
kids
doing
joined?
that right now, but if I even put those numbers on the table, they would be.
We're not saying
We're not
numbers.
numbers.
We're
We
saying,
don't
what
want-
are you going to
We're not
That's
asking
why it's
for
too
the
long.
Right, we're saying
So we need a
benchmark
list
data
of
not
what
until
that
the
is
end of
going
the
to
year.
be.
What are we gonna ask you to
Two
help us
separate
compare?
things.
Let me go back.
That's all they're
One of the
asking.
reasons, one of the reasons that we talked about this goal with this proposed timeline over the summer was to identify metrics we use, assessments we have, data that we regularly collect, and what else should we be looking for, implementing, or considering around social emotional, around who knows what. Lisa and her team, she's met with her mental health team, counselors, social workers, and started that conversation to say what data that we typically either haven't collected or never, or assessments or things that we haven't done that we could, that would be not real intrusive, that wouldn't feel like one more initiative, that wouldn't feel like one more thing we're asking you to do, but it is in the natural course of pushing into classrooms, doing, I'm going to call it character ed, it's not character ed anymore. How many kids are you seeing? For what reasons are you seeing them? Anxiety, friendship, so on and so forth. And to build that piece of the puzzle. Margaret's right. We have a bunch of things that we do to kids to collect info, and there's a bunch of things that we want to know that we have to build. And that was the conversation we had in July and August to
Yes.
say, we've got to go talk to our people who boots on the ground, who do this every day, to say, what is the Westchester County Elementary Counselor Association, what do they use? What do they do? How do they identify growth over time? We've had an elementary counseling program for 3 years. That's it. It's in its infancy, and we just doubled it a couple of years ago that we have a second counselor. The goal, the idea with this goal of no later than the end of '22, which is, in 6 weeks, was to give our people time to recommend what we should be doing in addition to what we always have. That's it. It was to make sure that our people that are most responsible for this data have input, can go, talk to their colleagues, their specialists or whatever, and report back.
So should we ask the principals in the elementary schools to come share with us what they think we should be looking at to help measure the success? We're not educators.
I don't think it will be different. They're going to come in November, but they're going to give a status of the
Oh,
first
a
couple
Q&A?
months of school.
But what I'm saying is the metrics that they would want to measure to determine. So the question
Giving
to
that to
me,
Joe. Joe's compiling this giant list.
Those are the conversations we're having with our administrative team. What we don't want to do is we don't want to have.
so you're
more-
bringing those to us. We're not telling you what we want to measure.
Well, if
No.
you want to say, gee, we're missing this piece.
After
or-
we hear their ideas, we can say, oh, I thought of this, it's not
But
there.
that is the reason it
Right.
cannot be the
I think
last
that's
meeting in
fair,
December.
but
Yeah,
That
that's
is
why
the
it's like,
reason.
let's
But
get
the
the show on the road.
goal, remember, the idea here is to, what do we currently collect? What do we wish to collect? And make sure that the kids don't become guinea pigs either. And otherwise, we're going to be assessing to try to hurry up and meet a goal. That's going to have an unintended consequence. Our spirit of our conversation during the retreat was, we want to know, are they coming to school? Are they learning? Are they behaving? Do they feel good about themselves? They feel good about their situation? That gets into social emotional stuff that we typically don't measure, and schools usually
So
don't.
can you expedite that any more than,
We can talk to our teams who will be responsible for recommending that to see if they can go quicker.
But we don't want the numbers quicker.
No.
Just the top.
The
That's what
measurement.
topics.
I'm sitting here again as someone that didn't vote on it. I was not on the board last year. I honestly still sit here going, I don't understand why this wasn't already done. But that's besides the point. I said this the last time. I really feel very strongly that we already have this groundwork done. I don't want to wait until December 1st for this to come together.
We could come back in 2 weeks and say, here are the assessments we use at elementary that we would consider that we would suggest are considerable data points and give us good information over time. And then we'll need to come back probably at a meeting in November and say, well, and the mental health team suggests these measurements for these reasons, so on and so forth. We could give you that. It's we could rattle off 10 of them right now.
Like you can say the end of
But
December.
everything that's not being rattled off, because testing definitely measures something, but it doesn't give you the whole picture, is the parents' input and the students' actual input. Because we have an opportunity right now.
Well, I think that comes through what Lisa's team is going to do with
We've
this.
already had this discussion, and we have, I actually have another meeting tomorrow, my mental health team talking SEL, student input, there's going to be some sort of survey, very brief for the for the 1-2s, and then it gets a little bit more in depth as they get older. So we have all this information ready to go.
Are you going to do it for the parents as well?
That's tomorrow's meeting, so I'll be able to tell you as soon as I meet with my team. Because they're the experts in this, right?
Yes.
I just help guide them. So I think the thing that we have to think about is what is their real input and where are they getting their information? The elementary school counselors, the elementary social workers, psychologists, we all have listservs that we go through, which you know about, but they talk to all their colleagues. This is actually happening in one of the school counselors' home district. So this will allow us to say, oh, look they've asked this is way too much for our kids, or way too much to ask a kid, but maybe this goes to the adult kind of survey, right? And then those surveys can be posted, published, it doesn't matter.
But you're still working on it.
Correct.
So that's the point of why we were trying, not trying, but suggested pushing this out to December is because they're still actively working on this. So if Joko gives us an update in 2 weeks, then another 2 weeks we get another update. I personally would rather just all the information at once to see the whole picture.
I think the community would want to just see what's going on.
Because it sounds like half the board doesn't want to be waiting till the very end of the year, right? And then others are concerned that we need more time to come up with the metrics. So maybe there's a happy medium. Is there a meeting in November that we could put this on the agenda for?
What we could do is come back in November and say, here are the metrics that we typically use and why we would want to measure this over time. So a what and a rationale. And as we receive more information, we could always do that. This goal does not say that it must happen the last meeting of December. It says that it needs to happen by then.
Yeah, that's it's gotta be, it cannot be that last meeting. That's
Well,
what I.
this
But
is before.
historically, do we wait till,
Yep.
right, like it's humans, not we as just specifically this body or historically this
Well, yeah, we also
body.
get super busy, like the next meeting is already loaded, right?
Yes.
So my mind is saying that there is a time, hopefully in November, that this conversation can happen.
And we should get the pulse of the PTA on this too, because that's a big part of the academic experience in this district.
I probably want
That's cool.
metric.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, that's fine. And then the financial piece can come
Hopefully
separate.
next meeting.
As another,
The
That's not-
financial part can come next meeting. I
Awesome.
already have it. If
Okay.
you had asked me for today, we discussed it this afternoon.
If I was allowed to ask you, I would have.
okay,
Okay.
So,
so,
So next meeting.
UPK two?
hmm?
UPK two and all of it? Can we
Well,
take like a whole pulse?
other
Oh, now.
No, I'm
come
just-
on, give him an inch, right?
okay, so we can vote on this now?
I have all these
I'm
questions.
losing sleep over this, so, yeah, so is everyone good with goal 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The district, 2, the district will present the outcomes of the strategic plan at a Board of Education meeting before October 31st, and will develop prioritized projects and action teams, which will be presented to the community by June 30th, 2023. This is scheduled for our next meeting,
Right, for the
so-
first half is.
Yeah.
And then the second half is another by date. So I know some of you guys are getting hung up on this, like deliver by June 30th, but that doesn't mean we're gonna wait until the last board meeting of the school year.
We did that last year. That's what I'm saying. We have to really be cautious about these dates. Because we do see them as historically.
But the strategic plan process is involving hundreds of people. We've invested a lot of time, effort, and money already. So you can't rush the process. We're trying, one of our board goals is to increase community engagement. And if you're rushing through the process, you're rushing through the community engagement that we need to get to all of these things.
Can I also just add one thing? The budget vote is going to take place in May.
That's-
You won't know how much money you have.
You'll know some of it, because we have.
You'll know some,
But we're not gonna prioritize all projects, but we have presentations in January, in December and January to go over all 4 pillars.
Yep.
So we will definitely have an idea of what projects have been prioritized so that we can plan for next year.
And then once we have the budget passed, and we will hopefully pass a budget that would cover all those projects, then we can develop the prioritized action teams, right? Once we know we have the
happening
money.
now.
We'll
That's
hear
happening
about
soon.
that process in 2 weeks, about how we will operationalize, how we're going to encourage people to participate, what the oversight will be. I mean, I know you weren't there, but we spent an entire day with the strategic plan folks in the summer saying, when do we want our information? When do we want to hear? How do we want to sort of watch this process unfold? To what degree do we want to participate? But yeah, it's moving a big ship when you have hundreds of people participating, and they all want their voices heard.
I just don't want this to end up being shelfware, right?
Yes.
You know, I want to make sure that whatever we do is actionable. It's not just a nice document that we put together, but we're actually going to act on it. And to do that, we need the money, and we won't know if we have the money until May. So that, you know, and you don't want to rush something like this, because this is a change management project. This is not like a capital project plan where you get things done. This is a change in culture for the entire community.
So you're saying we won't even have
So-
we won't even know if the budget, our ideas in the budget pass until May, so,
So you'd rather do it right than do it fast.
yes,
Right?
I'm saying the same
what
way.
we're
I kind of feel that way. But at the same time, you want to make it actionable, and you want to give yourself some aggressive goals. So to me, it sounds reasonable. But again, you won't be able to do a lot of this until the budget passes.
Well, this is all written in there. It's just that, I know last
It's a
year.
very little
so
bit
here's
of
the thing.
time from
We
the budget
gave our
passing to-
final strategic plan. It was the last meeting of the year last year. Everyone's like tuned out. Like, we have to just be cautious of that as a board when we're setting our agenda and our goals, like when we're doing these dates. Because everybody at that point was
Well,
tuned
we're
out.
gonna be working, so as plans get prioritized through this school year, they're gonna be worked into next year's budget. The budget vote happens in May. What Corey's saying is, there's gonna be a final presentation of what was approved in the budget.
I know, and last year it was basically the last board meeting. We just need to be cognizant of that stuff. I worked on this very, very intensely and with a lot of hours and hours and hours and hours. So I understand. But we have to make sure that we're not just doing things. You need time, but this has to be a priority as well. So June 30th, like June is.
But if the budget's voted
May.
in May,
Right.
right, it's
Yes.
gonna end
But
up being.
we're gonna have we should have our priorities pretty well.
We're going to we committed over the summer to having quarterly updates. Remember, we did it
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we took the big calendar out, and we said, what do we
Little
want to
stickies.
do and when?
Mhm.
This is going to be a very regular conversation with regular updates. I don't think that we're going to have radio silence from October 28th until whatever
course
meeting in
not.
June.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's 2 parts here. On the one part, I agree, we don't want to do it fast, and on the other hand, we're talking about May 16, but really, the budget is done by March 15, because you don't want to have $1 million, so suddenly we say, okay, I want this new proposal, that's going to cost $1 million, add it to the budget. So you don't want to start with a budget, just to say a number of 90 million, and then suddenly in March, it turns out, no, we want another $1 million.
But that's gonna be happening. It's gonna be happening as we move through the strategic plan process. That we're gonna say, oh, this project needs to be prioritized, and we're gonna be adding it in
Well-
January.
Yeah, but I agree in January, but again, the deadline for the board to approve the budget, I think, and I'm not sure, but it has to be around the beginning of April, end of March.
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying. On the one hand, we cannot go very fast. On the other hand, we cannot go very slow, because then suddenly, it's March, and there's a new idea that it's going to cost $1 million, what do we do?
Yeah, you have to plan in the budget for, assuming we're gonna do everything we prioritized, here's what's gonna cost. But our community has a history of not voting in every budget. And if that budget gets voted down for whatever reason,
What history?
but we voted down, there was it 2013 that they voted down? Or was it
27.
20, what is it?
2007.
It was a very long time ago.
2007.
I
But
think
then
we're
we-
getting a little
Yeah,
ahead of ourselves with committing this until we will feel better about our timeline. You will see it in front of you when they present here in 2 weeks. And that we're going to have decisions to make. We're going to have to make adjustments to a budget or say, this is really great committee, the board will vote up or down, and then we'll determine when we phase things in. There will also be some costs. We can't assume that every initiative in the strategic plan is a new cost. And we had talked about this at our retreat. There's going to have to be a conversation around planned abandonment too. That there are some things we've done that we may need to replace or supplement or supplant, but I think we've got to get there first, and our job is going to be to determine what we're going to do and then when we're going to do it. And not everything will be able to be done by April 1st. But to fast forward a process, to hurry it up and hurry up, is sending a message that it would be and that it would be approved. And I think we've got to approach this, any initiative, to the extent possible, cost neutral to avoid any potentiality of a budget being voted down. And that if we approach this from a cost neutral standpoint, anything above and beyond then is really a deliberation. But you will see a very specific timeline and target dates over the next number of months when they come and present in 2 weeks. But those timelines and target dates are based on what we felt was a priority, which was outsourcing a lot of this discussion to our community, and we are going to be as good and as fast as our community can participate. And that is always a hang-up.
And this is kind of the point too. So we're meeting with them here on the 27th.
Yes.
So we got an email today from Ed Elements.
Oh, not everyone, just the people who are on the team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That we're talking to them the day and the day before that. Like, so it's like the day right before it.
It's, they come Thursday.
Yeah, but they're meeting with
Yeah.
the pillar groups.
Tuesday,
The action
Wednesday.
teams right before.
To give them a courtesy heads up saying, here's the final product, you worked on this, we want to celebrate your participation, and here's what it looks like, and you get a sneak peek before it gets completely unveiled to the community.
Yeah.
That we wanted to have very little daylight between those two.
Yeah.
the next three are easier.
Okay, so can we approve this one?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
During the 2022-23 school year, the district will engage architects to conduct a building condition survey that will evaluate all school buildings and facilities. The district will present the results of the building condition survey to the community and prioritize getting a turf field. I'm just kidding. Prioritize potential improvement projects by June 30th, 2023.
Another turf field? One wasn't enough?
Oh, you guys.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's great. We're on track. Goal 4, the district will update and communicate the long-term financial plan that will include responsible tax management, increases in state aid, facilities projects, and continued participation in advocacy initiatives to improve our financial stability. That one we slightly changed last time, and I like
We
it.
added the tax management.
Right, and it's not 10-year.
Yeah,
just
it's better
long-term.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Everyone's good?
Yes.
And there was no changes to number 5.
Okay, perfect. The school district will increase opportunities and methods to celebrate student and staff accomplishments to enhance a positive community culture.
don't forget Junior.
So he went.
You did. Did
He
you?
went,
Oh,
yeah.
you good?
I'm good.
All right.
And the district,
Thank
there
you,
were no
Cory.
changes to the district. Do we need to officially vote them on them?
Board.
Board goals. Do we
No,
need to?
you don't need to vote on your board. So you do need a vote on these.
Okay,
You
so.
need a motion.
I have a motion to approve the district goals for the school year.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. All right, I need a motion to close the meeting.
So
So moved.
Yeah, second, all in favor?
Aye.